Welcome. This is an Alt-Shift-X live stream to talk about the new episode of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, episode 4, titled Seven. In this episode, Dunk needs to find 7 knights to fight with him. 6 knights, for a total team of 7 to fight against Aryan. A trial of 7, the first in 100 years to decide if Dunk will live or die. And we have an epic moment at the end where Prince Baelor Targaryen, the heir to the throne, the hand of the king, sides with the lowly, humble hedge knight, Dunk. We also get to meet Prince Daeron Targaryen. We get some Fossaway action. The rotten apple, Stefan Fossaway, betrays Dunk. And we finally get a heroic, positive moment. We get the Game of Thrones theme song playing without the interruption of any diarrhea this time. So that's new. That's exciting. So we're going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about Otho Bracken, the man who farted. We're going to talk about it all. So thank you for joining me. We are making weekly videos about every episode of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. We are streaming every week. Usually we live stream at about 10:40 p.m. Eastern Time Sundays, right after the episode airs. But this week we are live streaming early because they released the episode early because of the Super Bowl. So we get to talk about it early. How exciting. So thanks for joining in. You can also listen to these live streams on the podcast feed for free with no ads, so there's a link to the Alt-Shift-X podcast in the video description if you'd like to do that. And also, Alt-Shift-X and Glidus, my rotten wormy cousin Alt-Shift-X, is doing weekly Dunk Time videos about each episode of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and those are fun and lengthy and are a good way to support this channel if you want to sign up. Alright, so we're going to talk about what happened in this episode. We're going to talk about the story. We're going to compare it to what happens in the books. We're going to try and understand what it means. We are not going to spoil future episodes of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, except at the end of this live stream. We will talk spoilers in the spoiler zone. You will be warned, so don't worry. It's going to be okay. I promise. Alright, so this episode is called 7, because Dunk needs a team of 7 knights. And the situation is that last episode, Prince Aryan Targaryen was attacking this puppet girl, Tanzel. So Dunk went in to protect Tanzel by attacking Prince Aryan Targaryen. And in this unequal world, you can't go around punching princes. So Dunk has been imprisoned. And there's a really interesting shot to open this episode. So Dunk is in his cell, and Dunk is looking up at the ceiling. And in those initial shots, it looks like just these tiny little specks of light. And it looks a lot like a starry sky. At first, we think we're looking at a starry sky until the light comes in and we see that it's a damp stone ceiling of Dunk's cell. So that contrasts with the starry sky that Dunk saw in episode 1, when Dunk and Egg were looking up at the sky together and they saw a shooting star. And at that time, Dunk and Egg felt lucky, they felt free, they felt hopeful. But now Dunk is looking up and he's just seeing a stone ceiling of his imprisonment. So it's a nice little visual way of showing the absolute mess that Dunk has gotten into. And I think that visually, there's a lot of grey, there's a lot of mist on the Tony grounds here towards the end of the episode. And there's also a rainstorm, and there's thunder, and there's all this dark imagery, which reflects the tone and the feeling of Dunk and of the episode right now. A lot of George R. R. Martin's writing is about disillusionment. His characters have big hopes and big dreams, and hopes and dreams don't come true the way that we hope sometimes. Sometimes things don't work out. Dunk dreamed of being a knight. Dunk dreamed of kissing Tanzel too tall. Dunk dreamed of being a hero, but it's all falling apart because he's imprisoned and Tanzel has left and Dunk might not really be a knight, and so nothing's quite coming true how he imagined it. His hopes and dreams don't come true how we think. But we've still got to find a way forward. and sometimes things do turn out well. And it's really validating and beautiful that Prince Baelor decides to help Dunk. He decides to be a true knight, because so much of this story is about showing us all of these corrupt knights, these terrible knights, like, Stefan Fossaway betrays Dunk, and Manfred Dondarrion is this womanizing, selfish, unpleasant person. And there's all of, and Arian is a cruel and vindictive, nasty person. And so in this world, there are so many corrupt, selfish, cruel people, but it turns out people like Baelor exist, and people like Dunk exist. So there is good in this world, despite the darkness. And so I think that interplay of like cynicism and hope is at the heart of this series, and it's really beautiful to see. And all the visuals with like the grey Tony grounds, with all these little, specks of hope within, this little ember of fire, I think is a way of visualizing that theme. So, at the beginning of the episode, Dunk is imprisoned and he gets visited by Egg. So, we now know that Egg is a Targaryen prince. Egg was pretending to be a stable boy. He was pretending to be some random kid, some random peasant. But now we know that he's actually a prince. So, as you can see on the family tree on screen, Egg is one of the sons of Prince Maekar Targaryen, and so Egg is the brother of Daeron the Drunken, who was the drunk guy in episode 1, who told Dunk to stay away from him. We'll talk about Daeron soon. And Egg is also the brother of Prince Aerion and Prince Aemon. And so this is completely discombobulating for Dunk. I mean, Dunk has a lot to process right now. Dunk just hit Aerion, and he's fighting for his life, and he's accused of this crime, and he might be executed. But like, also, to add to all of that, this boy who he thought was his like new best friend, he thought was just like this nice kid who he made friends with, turned out to have like a secret identity, and he was lying all along, and he had some kind of ulterior motive. And so, that's something that the director of the previous episode emphasized in interviews, was that Dunk feels betrayed. He feels like Egg has been lying to him, and he doesn't know who this kid is anymore. And so in this scene between Dunk and Egg in Dunk's cell, they add a lot of drama and emotion by exploring Dunk's feelings of betrayal and hurt and confusion. And that's something that the book doesn't do as much. The book doesn't go into a lot of that hurt and that drama. They add that for the show. And I think it's effective, because in the previous episode, we saw so much of Dunk and Egg becoming friends. We saw them making fun of each other and having breakfast together, and Egg teasing Dunk for having a crush on Tanzel. So all of that closeness really makes us feel this betrayal and hurt and confusion that comes now in the cell. And so Egg apologizes for lying to Dunk, and Dunk is mad about it. And also Dunk has reason to be mad, because it's kind of partly Egg's fault that Dunk is in this mess. Egg came to Dunk when Dunk was in Raymond's tent and said, "Hey, you've got to come and help Tanzel." And that's why Dunk went and helped Tanzel. If Egg hadn't done that, Dunk would be okay. In the later scene with Baelor says, "Hey, like, Egg, you should not have gone to Dunk, you should have come to me." Because if Baelor was there to intervene, then this whole situation would be different. Baelor, as a prince, as the heir to the throne, he has the power to stop Aerion. But Dunk doesn't, and that's one of the messed up things that's explored here, is that the highborn people like Baelor are allowed to do justice, but lowborn people like Dunk aren't allowed to do justice against a prince. So that, like, inequality is deeply felt here. There's also a little rat outside Dunk's window, and he, like, pats the rat, which is a bit gross. Dunk, why are you touching a rat, a wet rat in a cell? That's a bit gross. Of course, I'm contractually obliged to say that every rodent in Westeros is actually secretly being controlled by Larys Strong. Remember Larys Strong in House of the Dragon? Lots of people like to imagine that Larys Strong is secretly a warg and is skin changing into all of the rats in the series. because the Strongs are a first men people, and so they might have the blood of skin changers, and like skin changing into rats might explain how Laris knows so much. But and you know, there's rats all over House of the Dragon, so I mean, come on, they're everywhere. But anyway, that's a different TV show. Don't worry about it. So anyway, so Dunk is in the cell, and this reminds me a lot of the way George Martin talks about his childhood. So George R. R. Martin, the author of these books, George grew up in Bayonne, New Jersey, in the projects, and George talks about how he felt trapped in Bayonne, and Bayonne was boring, and he would imagine and fantasize about all the exciting things happening in distant places. He would look across the water from New Jersey at Manhattan and wish that he was there. And in Game of Thrones Book 1, Bran Stark is similar, because when Bran hurts his back, he's stuck in the tower, and he dreams of all of the exciting places beyond where he is now. And that's what Dunk does here, especially in the book. In the book, it talks about how Dunk is stuck in this cell all day, and Dunk is listening to the tournament still happening. So far, and yet so close. And Dunk wishes he was still a part of the excitement, but he's trapped, and he can only imagine what he's seeing. And so I think that wistful, longing feeling is really strong in the book, especially. So anyway, Aegon brings Dunk some food, and in the book, of course, there's a lavish food description. And Dunk talks about how Egg's real name is Aegon Targaryen, and how there have been 4 Aegon Targaryens previously, 4 Aegons. So the first King Aegon Targaryen was the Conqueror, who took over Westeros 209 years ago. And the second King Aegon Targaryen is in House of the Dragon 70 years ago, or 80 years ago. And he's played by Tom Glyn-Carney. And the third Aegon Targaryen, he was a sad boy. He was probably the saddest of the Targaryen kings. And Aegon was depressed and unpopular. And then he died, which, you know, mood. Here's a picture of Aegon III Targaryen. Aegon III Targaryen is called the Dragonbane because the last Targaryen dragon died during his reign. And some people claim that Aegon poisoned the last dragon. He was afraid of dragons. But he also at one point tried to bring dragons back. He got these Eastern sorcerers to try and bring back the dragons, which I think might be almost a retcon thing. I think George Martin changed his mind a bit about who Aegon III was. But yeah, Aegon III was sad and died. And then Aegon the Unworthy, he was, I think he's meant to be like a Henry VIII type character. Aegon the Unworthy was one of the worst Targaryen kings, and he was gluttonous and obsessed with sex, and he was petty and vindictive and corrupt, and he just was not at all interested in being a good king. And so his choices led to the Blackfyre Rebellion, the terrible war 13 years ago, because on his deathbed, Aegon IV legitimized all of his bastards, from the great bastards to the lowly bastards. He had zillions of bastards who he had on lots of different women. And so that led to the Blackfyre Rebellion, because it made Daemon Blackfyre in line to the throne. And so Daemon went around and said that Daeron II Targaryen, the current king, he claimed that he wasn't really the child of King Aegon IV. He claimed that he was a child of Aegon's brother, Aemon the Dragon Knight. It was a whole, like, Maury Povich disputed parenthood type situation. But the point is that led to the Blackfyre Rebellion. So Aegon IV was not all that long ago, and he was the most recent Aegon Targaryen king. And of course, in the Game of Thrones TV show, it says that Jon Snow's real name is Aegon Targaryen. I tend to think that in the books, Jon Snow's real name isn't Aegon Targaryen. I tend to think he might have a different name, because there's already a different Aegon Targaryen in the books called Young Griff. If you want to know about Young Griff, watch our Varys video, because Varys's real plan in the books is to support Young Griff. Anyway, so you know, Dunk is realizing that this kid Aegon is not just some kid who he made friends with. He's secretly a prince, and I think that part of Dunk's hurt here is that he feels like he's been taken advantage of by someone who's more powerful than him in some ways, right? Like, I think Dunk and Egg, like, Dunk thought that Egg was an underdog like him. Dunk thought that he was just some plucky kid who's, trying to get out of the stables. Like, Dunk thought that Egg was from King's Landing, from like maybe from Flea Bottom, like Dunk was. And Dunk thought that Egg was an orphan, like he was. And Egg let Dunk believe that. But the truth is that, yes, Egg is from King's Landing, but Egg is from the Red Keep. He's from the palace in King's Landing, not the slums like Dunk. And yes, Egg's mother is dead, but Egg's father, Maker, is still alive. So part of why Dunk liked Egg was because Dunk thought that Egg was like him. But now Dunk is learning that Egg is very much unlike him, and that hurts a lot. And so Dunk feels like Egg has played a trick on him or some cruel prank, and that's why Dunk's feeling so hurt. But then Egg explains his situation. So the reason why all of this happened is that two of Maker's sons went missing. Darren the drunk guy who we meet this episode, and Egg. They went missing. And the reason for that is that Maker commanded Darren to ride in the tournament. Let me pull up the family tree. Maker commanded Darren to partake in the tournament, and the book says that Maker was hoping that Darren and Arian would do better than Baelor's son Valar in the tournament. Maker has issues. He feels inferior to his more popular brother, and so Maker wants to prove himself and prove that his family is better by forcing Darren to ride in the tournament, because Darren is Maker's firstborn, his eldest son, his heir, the person who will inherit all that Maker has. So Maker really wants to pressure Darren into being a cool, powerful, successful knight. But Darren is an alcoholic, and he's depressed, and he's not good at anything, and so it creates a whole lot of tension and frustration. And so Darren didn't want to ride in the tournament, because he sucks at it and it's dangerous. And so when they were going to Ashford, Darren instead turned around and ran off. And he ran off with Egg, because Egg is meant to be Darren's squire. So Darren's plan was just to hide in that inn until the tournament was over so he wouldn't have to ride. And so Darren didn't want to be found by his father Maker's men, so Darren shaved Egg's head. Because, Darren has dark hair. Darren doesn't have the blonde, white Targaryen hair, but Egg does. So that's why Darren shaved Egg's head, so that they wouldn't be recognized as Targaryens. And so that's why Dunk sees Darren in the inn, and that's how Dunk bumped into Egg. And so Egg was frustrated and disappointed and bored being stuck at this inn instead of being at the tournament, and so Egg decided to attach himself to Dunk, and Egg decided not to tell Dunk his true identity. So it's it's interesting morality all round, because it's like, well, Egg was lying to Dunk, but Egg says this episode, Egg says, I didn't think I was doing the wrong thing. And Egg did put Dunk in a difficult situation, but it's like Egg was just trying to go to the tournament, and Dunk did need a squire. Egg really did help Dunk by being his squire. And the morality for Darren is interesting as well, because it's like, Darren just didn't want to participate in this dangerous tournament, which seems like a pretty fair thing to do. But Darren has an obligation as Maker's eldest son to try and to meet the standards of what a strong, good man and a strong, good heir is meant to be in this world. And Darren talks about how, Darren feels like he's not as smart as Aemon, and he's not as strong as Arian, and it's kind of like, what is his place in the world? And I think, ironically, Darren's feelings of being inadequate are really similar to his father Maker's feelings of being inadequate. Maker feels like he's not good enough, he's not as good as Baelor, and he's not as smart as Aerys, and he's not as gentle as Rhaegal. Maker feels inadequate in the same way that Darren feels inadequate. And isn't it wonderful how the father has the same insecurities as the son, and yet passes those insecurities down? It goes back and back to our fathers and their fathers. That's what Tyrion says in the books. This book is so much about intergenerational inherited trauma. It's beautiful. So anyway, Dunk's talking to Aegon. Dunk feels hurt, and Egg explains the situation, how he ran off with Darren. And we talk about how in the book, Dunk thinks about Egg's lie about his identity. And then Dunk thinks he knew what it was like to want something so badly that you would tell a monstrous lie just to get near it. So one of the things we've talked about all through this season is the question of, was Dunk really knighted by Sir Arlen? Because in this world, you can't just decide to be a knight. You have to have a knighting ceremony where another knight knights you and you make a vow. So we see that this episode when Lionel Baratheon knights Raymond, because Lionel's a knight. He can knight Raymond. And Dunk says that Arlen knighted him, but we never see Arlen knighting Dunk. And there's that flashback where young Dunk asks, do I get to be a knight one day? And then Arlen just spits. So it's never quite explicitly said, but it seems that Dunk is lying and he's not really a knight. And one of the stronger, and it's the same situation in the book. The book never really says whether Dunk was knighted, but it strongly implies that Dunk wasn't knighted. And this is one of those strongest hints. Dunk told a monstrous lie just to get near the knighthood that he wants. And so I think the fact that both Dunk and Egg have a big lie is really important and interesting. Egg lied about his identity, Dunk is lying about his knighthood. And now Dunk knows about Egg's lie, whereas currently Egg doesn't know about Dunk's lie. And I think that is interesting. And so, yeah, Dunk is all angry at Egg, and Dunk says it's a bit of bad luck that we found each other. That line isn't in the book, but it's an interesting line because we were talking before about how that the opening shot of this episode looks like a starry sky. The starry sky in which Egg and Dunk saw a shooting star in episode 1, and Egg said it's good luck, but now it feels like bad luck. And now in the sky above them, there are no shooting stars. There's just cold, wet stone, you know? And so Dunk questions his heraldry in this episode. Pate gives Dunk his shield that was painted by Tanzel, and Dunk starts to question the imagery of the shield. I think it's really powerful the way they discuss Tanzel's painting, because Dunk says that, you know, he had thought that the heraldry was hopeful. He thought that the shooting star was lucky. But now he says, well, it's a falling star, and a falling star is a negative image, and that suggests death and disaster. So in the same way that Dunk's hope has turned into fear and desperation and danger, like he's reinterpreting his own symbolism here, you know? The sky has no stars in it now. So then Dunk goes and talks with Baelor Targaryen. And Baelor has like a thoughtful take on this whole situation. Baelor says that, well, it's, you know, Egg shouldn't have asked Dunk to help. And Baelor talks about how whether or not Tanzel was actually intending treason when she did the puppet show with the dragon. And Dunk starts to kind of question Baelor's knighthood, where Dunk starts to say, well, don't all knights swear to protect the innocent? And that's something that doesn't happen in the book so much. Dunk really questions Baelor here and sort of sets up this question of like, hey, Baelor, what are you going to do about this situation? Don't you think it's right that we stopped Aerion? And so I think it's a smart change how this episode starts to give Baelor more of an arc, whereas in the book we don't see that. The show adds that. So Baelor Targaryen, of course, is the firstborn son of King Darren II, and so Baelor is heir to the throne. Baelor is the father of Prince Valar, who's one of the jousting champions, and he's also the Hand of the King. So you can see Baelor's hand pin here. It's similar to the hand pin that Ned Stark wears and Tywin Lannister wears in Game of Thrones, that Tyrion wears, the Hand of the Queen, later on. Except Baelor has this like dragon scale, dragon tail looking metal thing attached to the pin, which is pretty cool looking. It's interesting how the Targaryens use imagery differently. Like Aerion straight up wears like dragon spikes and he rides a dragon skull horse and everything. Baelor's a little bit more subtle with it, but the Targaryens are trying to remind you that this is the house of the dragon. They just, you know, don't have any dragons anymore because the dragons died out. And that's something that Stefan brings up when he says, well, where are the bloody dragons? I don't see any dragons. And there's this feeling of like discontent against the Targaryens and a desire to reject the Targaryen rule. And that's something that isn't in the book either, but I think that makes sense given like the Blackfire Rebellion happened recently, and it all plants the seeds for Robert's Rebellion that happens many years from now when the Targaryens finally are overthrown. So yeah, Baelor is really thoughtful in this scene. Like, he's saying that, yeah, Dunk had good intentions in stopping Aerion, and yes, Egg had good intentions, but he got Dunk into trouble. So we really see how Baelor is a thoughtful guy who sees both sides of every conflict. He sees the moral complexities of the situation. And Baelor also talks about how, well, he has an obligation to Maekar, and he has an obligation to his nephew Aerion. Like, Aerion, he is a dipshit, but Aerion is Baelor's nephew, and so Baelor has an obligation to side with his nephew. But also, Baelor is a knight, and he has an obligation to protect the innocent, like Tanzil. But also, Baelor is a prince, and he has an obligation to create stability and rule of law. So, Baelor has many different competing obligations of oaths and family and morality and politics, and it's like, how do you juggle all these different concerns and do the right thing? And that's something that comes up constantly in Game of Thrones. Like, Jon Snow has this moral dilemma where it's like, does he stick with his Night's Watch oath and protect the North from the wildlings, or does he stick with his love, Ygritte? Or like Jaime Lannister has to choose between keeping his Kingsguard oath to King Aerys, or he has to choose to kill Aerys to protect the lives of the innocent people. Like, the author George Martin is obsessed with these moral dilemmas where there's no one correct answer, and you have to balance lots of different values and different concerns, because I think that is the reality of the complicated world that we live in. And by putting his characters in these really difficult moral dilemmas, the characters have to really define who they really are. I think that when we face these impossible moral dilemmas, that's when we find out who we really are, what our values really are. And I think we really see that with both Baelor and Dunk. And I think that Baelor and Dunk are the most heroic people in this story so far, because they really take action and put their own lives on their line to protect others in accordance with their values. So Baelor repeatedly in this scene, he asks how good of a knight Dunk is. And I think that question has a double meaning. So on the one hand, Baelor is asking, how skilled of a fighter are you? Like, if there's a trial by combat between Dunk and Aerion, will Dunk be able to win? Is Dunk skilled enough? But I think that the other meaning to this question is Dunk a good knight? Does Dunk keep the vows of his oath of protecting the innocent? And I think that turns back on Baelor as well. The question is, how good a knight is Baelor? Because if Baelor is a good knight, a true knight, if he keeps his oath to protect the innocent, then Dunk should protect Dunk. Then Baelor should protect Dunk, which is what he does in the end. So I think that that question of how good is a knight asks the question not only of how skilled are you at fighting, but it's also, do you stand by your real moral values and do the right thing? So Baelor explains that Daeron has put Dunk in trouble. So Daeron the Drunken, first son of Maekar, he was the drunk guy at the inn, and Baelor is saying that Daeron is blaming Dunk for Egg's disappearance. Daeron is lying, and he's saying that, oh, Dunk is a robber knight, and Dunk stole Egg, and Daeron claims that he's been running around trying to find Egg and trying to rescue Egg from the evil Dunk who kidnapped Egg. It's all completely untrue, but this is the lie that Daeron told to just protect himself when his father Maekar was saying, where the hell have you been? Instead of telling the truth and just saying that he was hiding at an inn getting drunk because he didn't want to ride in the tourney, Daeron lied and blamed Dunk, and so that is adding to the accusations against Dunk. Aerion is also saying that Dunk must die because he attacked Aerion. So there are two princes accusing Dunk of crimes, and so that's why a trial is inevitable. And so Baelor says that, yeah, it's most likely that if there's a trial, you'll have your hand cut off and your foot cut off because Dunk punched Arian and kicked Arian. So that's like, if there's just a trial, like a legal trial, that's the likely outcome. And then Dunk also has the option of demanding a trial by combat. And there's actually, like, we've seen trials by combat before in Game of Thrones. It's like in Game of Thrones Season 1, Tyrion is accused by Lysa Arryn, and so then Bronn fights in a trial by combat as Tyrion's champion against Vardis Egan, and Bronn wins. And then in Game of Thrones Season 4, Oberyn Martell fights the Mountain as a trial by combat against Tyrion again, when Tyrion is accused of killing King Joffrey. So we've seen multiple trials by combat in Game of Thrones before, but what we haven't seen is a trial of 7. This is the first time we've ever seen 7 men fight 7 men, which we'll talk about this matchup later in the stream, and we'll talk about the history of trials of 7, etc. But yeah, these on screen are the combatants in the trial by 7 that's going to happen. And interestingly, like this whole like trial by combat thing, it has a basis in real law in history, of course. And there's actually a specific legal case that inspired this story, I think, because in real English history, in 1818, there was a case called Ashford v. Thornton. Ashford, the name of this castle, the name of this place in the story. So in this real legal case, Ashford v. Thornton was about Abraham Thornton, who was accused by William Ashford of murdering his sister, Mary Ashford. And Abraham Thornton demanded a trial by combat. In 1818, a real Englishman demanded trial by combat. And so there was this whole legal argument in England about, like, hang on a minute, is that still a thing? Can you demand trial by combat in 1818? And there was a lot of disagreement over whether Thornton should be allowed to demand trial by combat. And so that legal case was believed to be probably an inspiration for the book Ivanhoe by Walter Scott, which is the basis for the 1952 movie Ivanhoe. And author George Martin says that the Ivanhoe movie is what inspired Dunk and Egg. And so I think that the reason why this story is set at Ashford is because of the real 1818 legal case, Ashford v. Thornton. Isn't that cool? I think that's pretty neat. All right, so there's this whole conversation between Baelor and Dunk, and I think what's interesting about this scene compared to the book is this scene really... it really focuses on Baelor and Baelor's decision-making and Baelor's values as a knight and whether he will help Dunk. Because one of the things, one of the additions that isn't in the book is that Dunk says, hey, Baelor, do you believe that? Do you really believe that Tansel was intending treason? And Baelor doesn't answer it. In the book, it's more straightforward. Baelor says, yeah, I probably would have done the same thing in your place, Dunk, but the show's a little bit different. So anyway, the next scene, Dunk goes to talk with the lords. He goes to face the people in charge. And so this is a pretty impressive lineup of lords. The most important people, some of the most important people in the realm are here facing Dunk. So this guy here is Leo Tyrell Longthorn, the ruler of the Reach of this entire region. He's also that great jouster who we saw doing all those tricks in episode 2. And he also refused to vouch for Dunk in episode 2. So he's not super friendly to Dunk, but he's a very powerful politician. Then, of course, Prince Baelor, heir to the throne, and then Maekar, his brother, and then Arian, the dipshit, who Dunk fought. And then there's also Lord Ashford. And one of the fun little through lines of this scene is that everyone's kind of making fun of Ashford for being the least important person here. So, like, Arian is obnoxiously eating walnuts and, like, cracking walnuts with his knife. And then Arian forces Lord Ashford to go and pick up a dropped walnut for him, just as a way of showing his authority and power over Ashford, as a way of demeaning Ashford. He makes him pick up a walnut. And so one of the fun things about Lord Ashford is that he's really trying to assert his power. And like Plummer was saying, that Ashford has overspent on this tournament. He's trying to make himself seem important. He's wearing all of this fancy jewelry. Like, Lord Ashford is the poorest and least powerful lord here, but Ashford is wearing by far the shiniest jewelry and the most expensive looking clothes. So Ashford is really spending beyond his means, and he fancies himself really important and powerful when he's not. Whereas the actual powerful people are a lot more self-assured and understated. Baylor especially. So Dunk comes up and says, okay, I demand trial by combat. Because if Dunk doesn't demand trial by combat, they will probably cut off his hand and his foot. So he demands trial by combat. And Arian's reaction is to say, I refuse. Arian tries to get out of it. And it's only when the other lords say, no, you can't refuse a trial by combat. Like, Arian could back off and say, okay, I don't accuse you of crimes anymore. He could withdraw his claim. But Arian instead goes, okay, I'll demand a trial, but I demand a trial of 7. 7 men against 7 men. So it seems to me that Arian is trying to weasel out of this situation. Arian doesn't want to fight Dunk alone, is the sense that I get. I mean, remember, like, at the end of last episode, we saw Dunk beat up Arian pretty good. And Dunk is a lot bigger and stronger than Arian. Dunk also looks older than Arian. What, does he in the show? Yeah, I don't know how old the actors are. But, yeah, it seems like Arian's trying to weasel out, and then Arian only asks for a trial of 7, because then it's like, oh, maybe he's not as scared if he doesn't have to face Dunk alone. And that isn't in the book. In the book, Arian comes across as a little more smug and a little more confident. And it seems like the only reason why Arian demands a trial of 7 in the book is because, A, Arian doesn't think Dunk will find 6 other knights to fight with him. So by asking for a trial of 7, Arian is probably assuring that he won't have to fight at all, because Arian knows that Dunk probably can't find 6 other men. But also Arian is doing a trial of 7 to rope in Darren, just to be a dick to Darren, because Darren doesn't want to ride in the trial of 7. Darren doesn't want to fight. And Arian just puts his brother in that situation to be a dick, I think, is the other thing that's going on. But yeah, Arian, I think, is a little more afraid in the show here, which I think is interesting. Seeing a little bit more vulnerability from him, I think is interesting. It's a bit of a twist on the character. So in the show, Maekar says, "What is a trial of 7?" And that line isn't in the book. Because the Trial of 7 is an ancient and archaic tradition that very rarely actually happens. So the Trial of 7 originated in Andalos in the east. So the Andals are a people who came from the east and who then came over and colonized and populated Westeros thousands of years ago. So like Westeros started with the giants and the children of the forest. And then thousands of years ago, the first men came to Westeros. The first humans in Westeros came to Westeros. And the first men fought wars with the children of the forest. And ultimately, the first men made peace with the children of the forest in the Pact. And there are theories that the children of the forest might have been low-key mind-controlling the first men through sinister blood magic. You should read George Martin's short story, And 7 Times Never Kill Man. If you read George Martin's sci-fi story and 7 Times Never Kill Man, you will never look at the Children of the Forest the same way. Because that's a story about like humans colonizing an alien world and the aliens manipulate them into a peace which is actually not really in the humans' interests. It's George has been reusing these ideas for ages. But anyway, the first men came to Westeros and they made an uneasy peace with the Children of the Forest. And then somewhere between like 2,000 and 4,000 years ago, the Andals came to Westeros, and the Andals brought steel, and they brought the Faith of the Seven, and they warred with the First Men, and the Andals mostly defeated the First Men and mostly took over Westeros, except for the North. The North is one of the only places that resisted the conquest of the Andals, and that's why the North is culturally unique, and the North has this tradition of worshipping the old gods, instead of worshipping the new religion, the Andal religion, the Faith of the Seven. So since the Andals were like keen on numerology a bit, I guess, the Andals religion is the Faith of the Seven. So for that reason, the Andals have this tradition of fighting trials of seven. And so that's where it's a trial by combat where you have a team of seven against a team of seven, and whichever side wins the fight is deemed to be correct in whatever legal dispute you have. And the idea is that the gods will intervene. So the gods will help whoever is correct and righteous, the gods will help that side win the fight. Although in the books, Leo Tyrell points out that that is kind of ridiculous. Like Leo Tyrell in this scene, he says, well, you know, maybe the Andals just really liked fighting, and that's why the Andals insisted on trials of seven instead of one-on-one. But yeah, that's the trial of seven situation. And the last time a trial of seven happened was with Maegor the Cruel. So King Maegor the Cruel was the third Targaryen king of Westeros, and he was an asshole by all accounts. He loved violence and murder and domination, and he fought a war against the Faith of the Seven, because Maegor insisted on marrying like 6 different women at once, and the Faith found that objectionable. And so the Faith challenged Maegor and warred against Maegor, and so Maegor challenged the Faith to a trial of 7, which is pretty fun. It's a bit like challenging the Catholic Church to pistols at dawn, you know? Or did. Or maybe the Faith challenged him, I forget. But in any case, it was a 7-on-7 fight, and it was a brutal fight. And King Maegor Targaryen the Cruel was the last man standing. Maegor the Cruel just barely defeated the challengers. And then just after Maegor killed the last of his opponents, Maegor collapsed. And for 30 days, Maegor was unconscious and insensate. And everyone's like kind of hoping that Maegor is gonna die. But then this witch called Tyanna of the Tower comes over from the east, and like she alone took over Maegor's care, and then Maegor came back. And so a lot of people are like, hang on, like, did Tyanna heal King Maegor the Cruel, or did Tyanna resurrect King Maegor the Cruel? Is it possible that King Maegor actually died and then Tyanna brought him back to life? I think there's a lot of sick artwork of Maegor and Tyanna that you can see online. But yeah, so that's what happened the last time a Trial of 7 happened. There's a lot of theories, incidentally, about Daenerys. Like, some people believe that Daenerys Targaryen died on the pyre at the end of Book 1, Season 1. And that Daenerys is actually, like, a fire zombie all this time. I don't really subscribe to that, but, yeah. So that's the last time that a Trial of 7 happened. It was, like, over 100 years ago, 150 years ago. And so it's a pretty obscure thing to bring up in this conversation now, but that's what Aerion does. He brings up the Trial of 7. And in the book, Lionel Baratheon, like, he joins Dunk's side because he's like, yeah, this sounds like good fun. This sounds like a good way to get glory, is to participate in the first Trial of 7 in 150 years. So yeah, this is one of those meetings that probably could have been an email. It's like the world's worst Zoom call, but what they decide is that there's going to be a Trial of 7. Longthorn is Ashford's boss, and Baelor is Longthorn's boss. So this is about like when you have a meeting with like the CEO, who is Baelor, and then the regional director, who is Longthorn, and then the executive assistant to the regional manager who gets his coffee. That's Lord Ashford. And then Aerion is, I guess, like the work experience kid who insists on being awful. I guess that's who Aerion is. So yeah, they play power games with the Walnut, and Aerion seems a little bit more confident in the book, but a bit more weaselly and cowardly in the show. Darren the Drunken is present in this scene in the book, and Darren says, like, hey, I really don't want to participate in the Trial of 7. But yeah, Aerion insists on a Trial of 7. And let's go to the next scene. So Dunk has just been told that you have to find 6 knights to fight alongside you, or else you'll die, or at least have your hand and foot cut off, which is pretty grim. Because, I mean, in episode 2, Dunk struggled to find just one knight to vouch for him. In episode 2, Dunk could not find one knight to just acknowledge Dunk's existence as a knight. So how the hell is Dunk possibly going to find 6 knights to risk their lives for him? Like, Dunk has to find 6 knights who will go up against the royal family. I mean, look at this lineup. Like, the people who Dunk has to fight. Baelor Targaryen and Maekar Targaryen are war heroes. Well, yeah, they don't know Baelor. Yeah. But Maekar Targaryen is a war hero. Maekar is the anvil. Aerion, everyone knows, is like a dangerous piece of shit who, like, wounded Harding's horse. Donald of Duskendale, Roland Craycall, and Willem Wilde are Kingsguard knights, so they are ostensibly some of the greatest knights in the realm. I mean, there's a line in the book that says that the Kingsguard, Donald, Roland, and Willem, are probably the most skilled warriors in Westeros, apart from Baelor Breakspear. Baelor Breakspear is said to be possibly the best knight in Westeros currently. So it's like, who would want to go up against the Kingsguard and Prince Maekar? Like, not only because of the danger of going up against such formidable knights, but also the political implications. The Targaryens, the royal family, are not going to be happy with you if you fight them, especially if you win. So it is dangerous, both, like, politically and in terms of the combat, to side with Dunk. So it really seems as though Dunk is screwed. So there's this sudden cut of Dunk stepping out, and then suddenly it cuts to Thunder. Is this episode directed by Sarah Adina Smith? I think it is. Sarah Adina Smith does a lot of this, like, fun, creative directing. Yeah, Sarah Adina Smith directed this. And so she does this fun cut from the okay weather to the rainstorm. And, you know, again, I think that symbolizes the sudden loss of hope, the sudden change of Dunk's fortunes. At the start of this season, he was so hopeful that he was going to win the tournament and be a knight and kiss a girl, and now he's like, well, guess I'll die. that didn't work out. And he says as much to his horses, Thunder and Chestnut. Dunk says, "Oh, lads," to Thunder and Chestnut. In the book, The Hedge Knight, it says that Chestnut is female, but in a later book, it says that Chestnut is male. George Martin can't make up his mind what sex this horse is. So is lads the correct word for these horses? Who knows? So Raymond finds Dunk and brings him into the tent. And Raymond is saying, man, this is a bad situation. But Stefan, the cousin of Raymond, the knight, says Stefan Fossaway, says, I'll fight with you, because he saw what Aerion did to the puppeteers, and he says that knights are meant to protect the innocent, so I will side with you. And it's funny that Stefan is saying all the right things here, and Stefan is saying, yeah, we've got to do the moral thing, because at the end of the episode, Stefan betrays Dunk and sides with Aerion instead. So Stefan's words are so empty here, and I think having Stefan say all the right things and talk about morality and honor and glory really makes Stefan's betrayal all the more despicable, because Stefan knows that Dunk is the right side, but he so selfishly goes against that. And so Stefan says a line that is not in the book, which is, us Fossaways, we were here long before the Targaryens came to our shores, and we'll be here long after they are gone. And so that's another example of the sort of anti-Targaryen sentiment that they're exploring in this season, that isn't in the book. So, like, in the book, there's no sense of, like, political insecurity with the Targaryens. But I think that's partly because when George wrote The Hedge Knight, when he published it in 1998, George Martin hadn't invented the Blackfire Rebellion yet. A lot of the history and the world building, George hadn't invented it yet when he wrote this book. And so now that he has invented the Blackfire Rebellion, it makes sense to add a lot of that political insecurity stuff in hindsight. It's almost like a retcon that actually makes a lot of sense to talk about this. And it's really interesting in terms of, you know, the politics of it all. So, like, obviously Robert's Rebellion happens about 16 years before the main Game of Thrones series, and that's when Robert and the Arryns and the Tullys and the Starks defeated the Targaryens and put Robert Baratheon on the throne. But, like, that was a long time coming. It makes sense that for generations there were people who were unhappy with the Targaryens. Because as Raymond said last episode, many Targaryens have been mad, cruel tyrants, like King Maegor the Cruel. And sometimes that, like, political discontent, sometimes plotting against the royals, sometimes that happens at tournaments. So in the Game of Thrones books, there was a tournament called the Harrenhal Tourney in 281 AC. So this is like some 18 years prior to the main Game of Thrones series. And so the Harrenhal tourney was a big tourney. It was the best house party in Westerosi history. Ned Stark or Brandon Stark hooked up with the Shara Dane, maybe. Robert Baratheon was partying. Barristan Selmy danced with the Shara Dane. Everyone was having a big, good old time at Harrenhal. Partying and drinking and hooking up and conspiring against the monarchy, as happens at all good house parties. And there's all this stuff in the history books about how Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, son of the king, Aerys Targaryen, may have organized this whole tournament as an opportunity to plot and to build alliances and to plan to remove his father, the Mad King, from the throne. But Rhaegar seems to have gotten a little bit distracted at that tournament, and he ended up hooking up with Lyanna Stark, which actually just led to Robert's Rebellion, or contributed to Robert's Rebellion, when the entire Targaryen family was taken down. But it's really interesting that Rhaegar was planning to replace the Mad King with himself, but what actually happened was the entire Targaryen regime coming down. And so, there's all this relationship building that happened between the Baratheons, Jon Arryn, Rickard Stark, Hoster Tully. All those guys made friends with each other and built alliances, and that was the groundwork for Robert's Rebellion. And the reason why I bring that up is that, like, something similar could maybe be happening here now at the Ashford tournament. Because we've got at least the Fossilways who seem very critical of the Targaryens. Also, Robin Reisling in this episode says, when the crown goes against the gods, I side with the gods. So, Robin is going up against the Targaryens. So it's like, okay, is there a little bit of political unrest happening? Could this lead to more rebellion in the future? I think that's one of those interesting political questions to think about. In the book, Stefan Fossilway has a horse named Wrath. And Stefan has a little apple made of gold and gemstones fastening his yellow woolen cloak. And Stefan makes fun of Raymond, saying, "Oh, Raymond the Reluctant is afraid of this trial." Ooh. I feel like the Fossilways in general have a bit more drip in the books. Like, I think they're dressed a bit more fancy and they talk a bit more fancy. In the show, the Fossilways feel a bit more earthy and a bit more rude. Like Stefan is quite rude and crude in the show, whereas in the book I think he's a bit more smarmy and a bit more, I'm proper, I'm Stefan Fossilway, yes. Like, I think that's more the energy that you get from Stefan in the book, whereas in the show he's a bit more blunt and rude. So Stefan says, yeah, I'll help you out, I'll save you. He says, like, I promise that you will not die on my watch, Dunk, which really makes his betrayal all the more hilarious. And Stefan says that he will find more knights to help Dunk so that he can succeed. So he's like, yeah, I'll get Leo Longthorn, and I'll get Otho Bracken, and I'll get all these cool people. Lord Lannister, Lord Daemon Lannister, Lionel Baratheon. Like, if Stefan just says, oh yeah, all the most powerful lords and knights in the realm, yeah, they'll totally side with me. Like, we're homies. Like, we're good mates. Yeah. All the presidents of all the countries, yeah, I'll just call them and they'll help me out. And so Raymond in the book is like, yeah, I don't think these powerful people actually know Stefan. Stefan might think that those people know him, but they don't. So Stefan is a little bit delusional about his own sense of importance. And so Sir Otho, who Stefan mentions, that's the guy who stands up and farts towards the end of the episode. The Brute of Bracken. We'll talk about him in a bit. So Stefan leaves to go off and get help, to get more men to fight with Dunk. And Raymond says, yeah, that you should probably run away. Because, yeah, there's a very high likelihood that all of this is going to lead to Dunk's death. In the book, Raymond doesn't say, maybe you should run away. That's something that just happens in Dunk's thoughts. So as an adaptation, one of the challenges of this adaptation is that so much of the story in the book happens inside Dunk's head, in his thoughts. And in a TV show, you've got to find a way to turn thoughts into spoken words so that we can hear them. And so Raymond says this instead of Dunk thinking it. And in the book, Dunk thinks, yeah, like I could run away, but I would rather die a true knight than run away and live as an outlaw. Because if Dunk runs away, then he's going to be branded an outlaw. He'll be on the run for the rest of his life. He'd have to turn into a robber or a burglar to survive, and he would rather not do that. In the show, Dunk has this line, maybe the gods figure this is what I deserve for not knowing my place. And so that has a double meaning as well, which I think is really interesting. So he's saying that I didn't know my place because I went up against Prince Aryan. So this story is so much about the inequality between classes, the inequality between lords and peasants, the inequality between the rich and poor, the inequality between the powerful and the powerless. And so Dunk is saying, well, I guess I was an idiot for thinking that I could do something against the powerful people. I guess I'm an idiot for trying to do justice. I guess I'm an idiot for sticking up for the weak and vulnerable against the rich and powerful. But at the same time, he's also saying, I think, that he was a fool for trying to be a knight. Because I think it's hinted that Dunk is not really a knight. He was not really knighted by Arlen. And, you know, you got to remember that also Dunk was an orphan boy on the streets. Dunk grew up in Flea Bottom. Dunk started from absolute, like, rock bottom, nowheresville. Dunk grew up in the gutters. And he thought he could be a knight. He tried to be a knight, and that's really not working out very well for him. So I think this is this really depressing moment of Dunk thinking that, oh, you know, I am nothing, and I should not have tried to be something. It's a moment of really profound self-doubt. And, you know, I think that we all doubt ourselves and feel despair sometimes, and I think Dunk is communicating that really powerfully. So then Egg comes in. And Dunk finally gets to face Daeron Targaryen. So Daeron Targaryen is part of the reason why Dunk is in this mess. Because Daeron lied, and Daeron said that Dunk kidnapped Egg instead of telling the truth, which is that Daeron was just drunk and Egg went off with Dunk willingly. And Daeron says, yeah, I guess I am a piece of shit. and please pour me some wine. So in the books, it appears that Daeron is going through alcohol withdrawal because Daeron is alcoholic. And one of the things that people get when they're addicted to alcohol and they're not drinking is the shakes. And so that's something that the books mention. Daeron says, hey, look, I'm shaking. That's how in a bad way I am. So Daeron is like really going through it. Daeron is like physically, chemically, really going through it. And the last thing he wants to do is get on a horse and ride in a trial by combat against Dunk. And Daeron is like, yeah, like the reason why I lied is that my dad demanded an explanation. And so Daeron was just too much of a wuss, or too afraid, or too selfish, or too weak to tell the truth. So he says he blames everything on Dunk. And it's interesting that Egg, you know, tries to protect Daeron here and says, don't hurt him. So, you know, Egg, like, kind of sticks up for Daeron, even though, you know, Daeron really disappointed Egg by, like, taking him off to the inn instead of taking him to the tourney. In the book, Dunk doesn't, like, physically attack and knock over Daeron like this, although Dunk does draw a knife against Daeron in the book. So, yeah, you'll notice that Daeron has dark hair, not the classic silvery gold blonde Targaryen hair. And that's why Daeron didn't have to shave his hair. He only shaved Egg's hair when they were hiding from Maekar. But, like, along with Baelor, like, there's so many dark-haired Targaryens in this story, which I think is a nice little hint that Jon Snow can be a Targaryen. Like, just because Jon Snow is Rhaegar Targaryen's son doesn't mean he has to have the silvery gold Targaryen hair. Although, there are theories that maybe Jon Snow's hair color might change after he's resurrected in the books. The real Jon Snow video on Alt-Shift-X talks about Darren is really not coping with his father's disappointment, and he turns to alcohol and he makes little jokes and little self-deprecating, depressed comments, and it's very similar to Tyrion. So, like, Tyrion is a disappointment in his father's eyes, and Tyrion also uses alcohol and humor to cope. And so they're very different characters. And there's also parallels with Samwell Tarly and his father, Randall Tarly. Darren later apologizes for the whole situation and for the lies, and he makes all these funny little self-deprecating comments. And Darren says, yeah, I will have to fight in the trial, but, like, please don't kill me. Maybe just, like, bonk me on the head and then I'll fall over. There's this great line. I can't remember if the line is in the show, but in the book there's a line about, well, you know, my brothers are better than me at fighting and better than me at studying and better than me at everything, but none of them can best me when it comes to lying insensate in the mud. No one can lie in a ditch better than Darren the drunken Targaryen. In the books, Darren has a personal custom sigil. He has a Targaryen dragon, but his Targaryen dragon is facing backwards. Darren Targaryen is facing a different direction to everyone else, so his dragon heraldry reflects that. I think it's disappointing that in the books, Darren has his custom backwards dragon. Maekar Targaryen has a custom 4 dragons instead of 1 dragon because he's the 4th-born son. And Aerion Targaryen has a dragon with 3 different colored heads and golden flame on his heraldry. All this, like, custom unique heraldry is really cool, but they don't include it in the show, which is a little bit disappointing. It's a nice little touch. But I guess they didn't want to make the heraldry, like, confusing, maybe. Although they do make Aerion's dragon heraldry on his shield, like, kind of orange or yellowish instead of red in the last episode. So I don't know what they're doing with the heraldry. It's a bit unfortunate. Egg says, who's on your side, Dunk? And he says, I got Raymond's cousin. And then there's crickets. They actually play a crickets sound effect in the awkward pause, which I think is hysterical. But yeah, Egg says that the 3 Kingsguard, Donald, Roland, and Willem, are siding with Aerion, which is terrifying because they're extremely powerful knights, as well as Maekar and Darren. I mean, Darren's useless, but Maekar is a celebrated war hero of the Redgrass Field. So yeah, things are looking really bad for Dunk because he's currently only got Stefan against, like, 4 of the greatest knights in the realm. Egg explains why he hates Aerion so much. Egg says, when I was little, Aerion used to come into my bedchamber at night and put his knife between my legs. He says that he has too many brothers. One night he'd make me his sister, then he could marry me. Which is really, really messed up. Like, Aerion was threatening to cut Egg's genitals and make him his sister and marry him. So it's like threatened physical assault and, like, threatened sexual assault against his young brother. Like, it's really stomach-churningly horrible. Raymond laughs at that, which is like, that is so inappropriate, Raymond. But yeah, really horrible threats that Aerion has made against Egg. And Egg says that also Aerion threw his cat in the well. So Aerion truly is, like, over-the-top, cartoonishly evil. And this sort of, like, threatened assault against his own brother is similar to Euron Greyjoy in the books. Euron Greyjoy is one of the great disappointments of the Game of Thrones TV show. Because in the books, Aerion is genuinely terrifying. Go and check out the Euron Greyjoy video that we made on Alt-Shift-X. Euron Greyjoy is scary and, like, maybe going to cause the apocalypse. Whereas in the TV show, Euron Greyjoy is the bum pirate who says, "Ooh, stick my fingers in your bum," and he's like this cartoon like Captain Jack Sparrow ripoff. But no, like, Euron in the books is an eldritch monster, and we've got a good video about Euron. I'll put it in the video description. So this explains why Egg wanted Aerion dead. In the previous episode, when Aerion was jousting against Humphrey Harding, Egg shouted, "Kill him, kill him." And so that's why Egg hates Aerion and wants him dead. So yeah, pretty messed up family, pretty dysfunctional family. And Darren agrees, saying Aerion is a monster. Egg says that Aerion thinks he's a dragon in human form. So that's part of why Aerion was so angry at the puppet show. Aerion literally identifies as a dragon in some sense. And so that's why he felt so attacked by Tanzel's puppet show. In the at the end of this live stream, in the spoiler zone, we'll talk a bit more about the meaning of Aerion's beliefs there. Raymond, Darren drops one of the all-time great burns in any of these shows, which is Aerion thinks he's a dragon. If only Aerion thought he was an apple, then we'd all be a lot safer. And then Raymond looks really pissed off because the Fossaways have apples as their sigil, and they're always making apple puns, and Darren makes fun of how ridiculous that is. So then Darren and Dunk have a private chat where Darren talks about his dreams. I think it's really interesting that Darren chose to make this a private chat with just him and Dunk. Maybe Darren doesn't want Egg to hear about his dream, which I think is kind of interesting. Maybe Darren is trying to protect Egg from that in some sense. But anyway, Darren says that his dreams come true. So we know that many Targaryens throughout history have had prophetic dreams of the future. Daenerys, the dreamer Targaryen, hundreds of years ago, she foresaw the doom of Valyria, and it's because of Daenerys' dreams that the Targaryens are still alive, because the Targaryens left Valyria, where they came from, came to Westeros because of Daenerys' dream. It saved them from the doom of Valyria that destroyed Valyria, and that's why the Targaryens were the last dragon lords in the world, or believed to be. Go and watch our Doom of Valyria video. And in House of the Dragon, they expand more on this Targaryen dream stuff. They make Viserys a dreamer of the future and Helena a dream of the future. In the main Game of Thrones books, Daenerys has dreams of her dragons hatching before they hatch. So it is a real thing in this world where people can dream of the future. And that idea, Darren saying my dreams come true, I think is interesting, saying that to Dunk. Because this episode is kind of about Dunk's dreams not coming true. Dunk, at least in a metaphorical sense, Dunk dreamed that he would become a knight. He dreamed that he would win in this tournament. Dunk dreamed that he would kiss Tanzel Too Tall, and those dreams have not come true. This series is so much about dreams not coming true and how we deal with that. But Darren is saying he specifically had a dream of Dunk. Darren dreamed of Dunk and a fire and a dead dragon. And in dreams, dragons can represent Targaryens, their sigil. And so Darren's interpretation of this dream is that Dunk will kill Darren. That's why in episode 1, Darren drew his knife and said, "Oh, I dreamed of you, stay away from me." That's why that happened in episode 1. Darren thinks that the dream means that Dunk will kill him. But in this world, prophecies are treacherous, and it's difficult to know how they'll come true. So if you want to know whether Darren's dream will come true or how Darren's dream will come true, listen to the spoiler zone at the end of this live stream. It's interesting that Darren mentions a fire in his dream, because that part is not in the book. In the book, Darren just says, "I saw you and a dead dragon." And in the book, I think it says that the dragon is huge, and its wings stretch wide over Ashford Meadow, and you were with the dragon, but I couldn't tell if you killed the dragon or if someone else killed the dragon. But in the show, he says, "I saw a fire and a dead dragon," and I think that fire could have multiple meanings. So we'll talk about that in the spoiler zone at the end of this live stream. So Darren is a sad boy. Darren is sorry for lying about you and maybe getting you killed. And please don't kill me, because gods know why, but I don't want to die. I want to be alive. And so Darren's wrestling with his hatred of himself and his depression. There are so many sad boy Targaryens in this story. Aegon the Third, who we mentioned before, was one of those Targaryen sad boys. Rhaegar Targaryen is like the all-time greatest Targaryen sad boy. He was very melancholy, and he used to go and play his harp alone at Summerhall, and he tried to save the world, but also kind of doomed it at the same time. Go watch our Rhaegar video. And so Darren is very much of that mold. I think that some of those characters and the Targaryens in general, I think, are inspired partly by Elric of Melniboné by Michael Moorcock, who is a fantasy author who wrote about these pale dragon lords, these pale, incestuous, sad boy dragon lords. There are some actual specific references to Moorcock in the Game of Thrones books, like Hercune the Hero. Hercune is a name that's used prominently in the Elric books and appears in the World of Ice and Fire book. George Martin wears his influences on his sleeve sometimes, and the Targaryens are very heavily inspired by Elric of Melniboné. Michael Moorcock also inspired the Chaos Gods in Warhammer 40,000 and Warhammer Fantasy as well. Moorcock was very influential. Darren apologizes for probably getting Dunk killed, and it's pretty real of Darren. I think it's kind of nice. It puts Dunk in a weird position, because a moment ago Dunk was like wanting to kill Darren for getting him in this situation, but now Darren is apologizing and having a sort of emotional moment, and that's kind of nice. It's also cool how you can see embers flying through the air while Darren is talking about his dream, and that's very similar to a shot in House of the Dragon when Viserys talks about his dream, and the embers are flying around him when he's telling Alicent about his dream. And the mood of that scene is similar to this scene, because Viserys is looking really like depressed and drunk and sweaty and crazy in that scene. Because that's the thing about dreams, that they don't make your life better is one of the things in these books. We have these great dreams and desires, and like sometimes they drive us mad. Like sometimes our dreams are what destroy us, and that's something that George explores over and over. And we'll discuss that more in the spoiler zone later as well. Dunk's like, yep, okay, that's weird. Dunk doesn't really know how to handle this dream situation. And Darren says, well, I guess I'm doomed to some hell, a hell without wine. And then he walks off, that is something that Tyrion could say. Like, Tyrion would totally say that line. So Dunk's like, well, guess I'll die. And he hears like a memory of Tanzel saying, you were no knight. It's really interesting, that device, making us hear a character's memory. Like, that doesn't happen very much in the Game of Thrones show. So, like, why do you think that they did that this time? I think that it's because, this is a moment of depression and despair for Dunk, where he's like, I didn't know my place. I was too ambitious. I was an idiot for thinking that my dreams would come true. And so this is connecting that to that play of Florian the Fool. Because that line, you are no knight, that's spoken by Tanzel in the Florian the Fool play, which is about how heroism is foolish. And I think that what's going on here is that Dunk was a fool to attack Prince Aerion, and he probably will die because he tried to do the right thing, but it's still essential that we try to do the right thing and we try to live by our dreams, even when it sometimes blows up in our face. And I think that as much as people talk about these books being cynical, I think that at the end of the day, George Martin celebrates heroism in the face of despair, like Brienne, no chance and no choice. And I think that, George hasn't written the ending to his book series yet, but I think that A Dream of Spring will vindicate hope in the face of despair. So Dunk goes and picks up the head of the Florian the Fool puppet and looks at it, and it reminds me of like Hamlet picking up Yorick's skull, which is very much about death and facing death. It's similar to the moment with Daisy and the women in the tent in episode 1, where the women are saying, hey, like, you might die if you go and ride in the tournament. And so facing death and going on regardless Being a hero in the face of impossible odds is some of the greatest heroism there is. So then Dunk talks to Steely Pate. So he's the blacksmith who Dunk was going to buy some armor off, and Pate says that Tanzel has left. Tanzel has run off to go back to Dawn because Tanzel, was attacked by Prince Aryan. So she's like, well, I just got to get out of Dodge. I got to make like a tree because she's in danger from Aryan and the Targaryens. No one seems interested in giving justice for Tanzel. Like people are sticking up for Dunk, but Tanzel's just had to run away. And so Dunk employed Tanzel to paint his shield with his new heraldry, with the sunset and the shooting star and the elm tree. And so she left that with Pate so that Dunk could still get his shield, which is real of her. I was wondering if they might add more of Tanzel in the show. But they haven't added a whole lot more. They have expanded a lot of these characters in the show adaptation, like Lionel Baratheon gets way more screen time, for example. But Tanzel doesn't get a lot more scenes. Tanzel really only gets one extra scene in this show, and that's like the goose eggs thing, where she only says one line. So they don't expand on Tanzel a whole lot. And so Pate has a cool mobile armory wagon, which he travels around in, which, like, what a life, what a guy. And Pate gives Dunk a free upgrade on his shield. He says that the metal was old, and so he upgraded the rim, and it's heavier now, but it will be stronger. And they repeat this shield rhyme: oak and iron, guard me well, or else I'm doomed to hell. And that's something that Dunk repeats throughout the series, which he originally learned from Arlen. Arlen originally taught him that line. In the book, there's some fun banter between Pate and Dunk, where, like, when Pate sees Dunk, he looks Dunk up and down, and Pate says, 2 hands and 2 feet, I count. So it's to be a trial by combat, is it? And Dunk says, yeah, trial of 7. How did you know that it was going to be a trial? And Pate says, well, they might have kissed you and made you a lord, but it didn't seem likely, and it went the other way. You'd be short some parts, so follow me. So Pate observed that Dunk still had his arm and his foot, and therefore there must be a trial happening. And so, yeah, I really love this moment where Dunk is saying, oh, I actually kind of hate my heraldry, because I thought that my heraldry was hopeful, but actually it's kind of a negative symbolism, because the falling star, the shooting star, is falling, and the sunset implies the end of days. Sunset implies the coming of darkness. So he's like, well, actually, I thought that my heraldry was hopeful, but it's actually dark and depressing. And again, that speaks to that theme of, like, optimism turning to cynicism, hope turning to despair, dreams turning to disillusionment. I mean, this is like the Empire Strikes Back. Like, this episode is the Empire Strikes Back of Dunk and Egg of this season. Like, this is the moment of despair and darkness, and this is the dark that comes before the light and the hope and the optimism. And yeah, it looks like Tanzel did a pretty good job of the painting as well. Look how detailed and beautiful the painting is. Dunk chose the right person to paint his shield. And so Dunk is like, oh man, my symbolism's all depressing. But Pate says, nah, the elm is alive. And so Pate does a little bit of positive art interpretation on the heraldry and says, no, there is hope. Summer leaves for certain. It's so lovely. Like, Pate, you don't get the sense that Pate is poetically minded. You don't get the sense that Pate is much for art interpretation, but he does it for Dunk. He's like, nah, man, like, it's a good painting. There is hope. Like, what a guy. Like, how positive. Everyone needs a Steely Pate in their life to give them a pep talk when you really need it. I think that everyone needs a bearded, bald man to give them some positive art interpretation as a pep talk when you're feeling down in the dumps. I think everyone needs that, so that's beautiful. And Pate says that he'll give Dunk the upgraded shield for free, for a copper. Something that I really like in the book is that there's multiple people who thank Dunk for doing the right thing. Like, there's a scene where a bunch of common people come up and they thank Dunk for protecting Tanzil, for being a knight who sticks up for the underdog, who sticks up for the common man against the princes. And you get a little bit of a sense of that from this moment with Pate, but you don't get as much of a sense of it as in the book, where multiple people, like randoms, extras, come up to Dunk and say, thank you for doing the right thing. They don't do that in this episode, which I think is really disappointing. I wish they included that. So morning comes. I don't know if Dunk has had any sleep tonight, but yeah, Dunk has to fight for his life on like 0 sleep. I don't know why they insist on holding the trial early in the morning. Like, couldn't they just hold the trial in the afternoon so that everyone could have some sleep before they fight to the death? I mean, the audience will get a better show if everyone gets to sleep before they fight, but there you go. All right, so I'll pull up on screen the combatants in the Trial of Seven. So Dunk walks up to the tourney grounds and he sees that Humphrey Harding has joined him. So the reason why Humphrey Harding sides with Dunk is that Arion deliberately stabbed Humphrey's horse and caused Humphrey's leg to break really badly. And so Humphrey in the episode says, well, my leg is broken, I cannot walk, but as long as I can sit on a horse, I can fight. And that's a pretty badass thing to do, isn't it? Because, you know, the way that this tournament is going to work is that these 14 knights are going to ride into battle, and they're going to try to kill each other. And the fight is going to go on until either Arion is dead, or Dunk is dead, or Arion withdraws his claim and surrenders, or I guess Dunk can maybe have the option of surrendering, but if Dunk surrenders, they're going to cut off his hand and his foot, if not execute him. So this trial is likely to result in some deaths. Like, these people are going to be trying to kill each other. And so Humphrey's like, yeah, I'm going to go into this fight to the death with a broken leg. And if I fall off my horse, I guess I'll die. Better stay on my horse. That's pretty impressive. And then Robin Riesling, the maddest knight in the Seven Kingdoms, says that, well, I would die the king's faithful servant, but when the crown goes against the gods, so Robin goes against the crown. I think that's really cool and interesting that Robin is like really, he wants to be a faithful knight to the royal family, but he believes that Prince Arion is going against the will of the gods by attacking random common people. And so therefore Robin sides with Dunk. That line isn't in the book. Robin doesn't have any lines in the books, but they give him this whole personality. I like this, is that the chanfron? The fabric thing that the horse has on its head? It's a very simple, like very sort of handmade, simple looking cloth horse hat that is going on there, which is kind of interesting. Also, in the background, you can see the greatest facial hair in television history. So this is Humphrey Beesbury. We saw Humphrey Beesbury riding in a joust against Humphrey Harding. And you'll see that Humphrey Beesbury has a yellow moustache. Humphrey Beesbury has dyed his moustache yellow because he's House Beesbury, and the Beesburys have yellow and black heraldry. And I think this might be the best thing that I've ever seen, personally. Can we get some bees in the chat? Bees in the chat, please, for the yellow moustache of Humphrey Beesbury. This particular line is not in, like, this detail of the yellow moustache is not in the book. Bees in the chat, please. And also look at his stripy armor. Isn't his stripy armor delightful? I think this is one of the best outfits in like the history of Game of Thrones, so I'm pretty stoked about that. And we also get to see Lionel reclining here with his antlered helmet and all his gear. Okay, maybe that's enough bees in the chat, guys. Oh boy. So yeah, Lionel is siding with Dunk, Beesbury is siding with Dunk. In the books, they say that the reason why Humphrey Beesbury sides with Dunk is because Humphrey Harding is actually Humphrey's brother-in-law or something. So they've got like a family connection. So like Humphrey Beesbury and Humphrey Harding have just had this epic joust against each other, but they're also like family by marriage, and so they are like, yeah, I'll side with you, Humphrey Harding and Dunk. And Lionel in the book, Lionel Baratheon comes up and says, yeah, like, Egg came and asked me to fight for you. Egg dumps a cup of wine on Lionel's head in the books when he's telling him to come and fight for Dunk, which is fun. Whereas in the show, Lionel comes up and says, yeah, like Dunk says, "Oh, Stefan Fossaway asked you to come fight for me," and Lionel says, "Who the fuck is Sir Stevron?" which is hilarious, and it validates that idea that none of these fancy knights know Stefan. Stefan's delusional. Lionel was asked by Egg, and it's very adorable seeing Egg playing with an axe in the background. He's cute. And so Lionel in the show says, well, there hasn't been a trial of 7 in 100 years. I'm not going to miss a chance to bloody up the Kingsguard in their pretty white gowns. So that's another time that Lionel has, like, kind of sexualized or, like, feminized male knights. Like previously in episode 1, Lionel compared Dunk to a maid on her wedding night. And now Lionel is comparing the Kingsguard to people in pretty white gowns. So there's a lot of sort of homoerotic, flirtatious comments from Lionel in the show, which aren't in the book. But Daniel Lings appears to be having a good time. Also, can we appreciate the armor? Lionel's armor looks so good. Some great armor. I wish we got armor like this throughout all of Game of Thrones. Like, such great armor designs. In the books, Lionel says that he doesn't want to miss an opportunity to tweak Prince Maekar's nose. So Lionel wants to annoy Prince Maekar as well. And, let's remember that years and years from now, it's the Baratheons who rebel against the Targaryens in Robert's Rebellion. And so it's fun how Lionel is the one wearing a crown-like antlered coronet. And it's him who wants to tweak Maekar's nose, and it's his family who eventually defeat the Targaryens in Robert's Rebellion. I mean, let's remember that Orys Baratheon, the founder of House Baratheon, was maybe Aegon Targaryen's half-brother, so it's possible that there's Targaryen blood right from the beginning of House Baratheon. And also the Baratheons later intermarry with the Targaryen family again. So the Baratheons are sort of interconnected with the Targaryens by blood as well. So Lionel sharpens his sword in the book, and then Stefan approaches, and Stefan betrays Dunk. Stefan had just promised, you're not going to die on my watch, Dunk. I saw what Aerion did to Tanzil. I'm going to protect the innocent. I'm going to do the right thing. But then Stefan betrays Dunk. Which is so despicable, because Aerion promised a lordship to Stefan. Aerion said, if you side with me instead of Dunk, I will make you a lord. And I think that, the reason why Aerion does that isn't because Aerion needs another knight, or because Aerion thinks Stefan is a really powerful knight, although Stefan is a skilled knight. I think that Aerion is doing this at the last minute to deliberately screw Dunk over, to take away one of his champions, because Dunk can only compete if he has 7 champions, or 6 people to fight alongside him. So it's a really, sneaky dick move. And so I think we have to assume that Stefan did originally plan to side with Dunk, but when he went out to find other people to help him, he must have bumped into Aerion or one of Aerion's mates, and they told him to betray Dunk. Is presumably what happened. If you want to be really cynical, maybe we could speculate that Stefan was planning this from the start. You might speculate that Stefan was planning to betray Dunk, and maybe was planning to go to Aerion with the idea of betraying Dunk to screw him over at the last minute. It's not clear. Also, look at the apple armor. Isn't that apple armor beautiful? It's pretty hard to make apple-themed medieval armor look badass, but that is some badass apple-themed armor. My goodness. Whoever designed this stuff outdid themselves, in my opinion. And then something disappointing happens. So in the books, one of my favorite moments is when Aerion's 7 ride out. And the way it's described in the books is really beautiful. So this shot basically is described in the books as, quote, a column of knights came trotting out of the river mist. The 3 Kingsguard came first, like ghosts in their gleaming white enamel armor, long white cloaks trailing behind them. Even their shields were white, blank and clean as a field of new fallen snow. And then Maekar and Arian and Darren ride out behind them, who are 3 black knights alongside the 3 white knights. And so the black and the white, the gleaming white armor, the long cloaks like new fallen snow. I think that imagery is so powerful and evocative. But look at what we get in the TV show. It's all grey. You can't really see the knights very clearly. It's mostly just murky and unclear. And we don't really get any shot that shows us the 3 white knights and the 3 black knights clearly. So personally, I was really disappointed by these shots. It just doesn't capture the beauty and the majesty that's described in the books, in my opinion. We only get these momentary couple of distant, hazy shots. So I thought that was disappointing. So yeah, Stefan betrays Dunk, and so Raymond is like, wow, Stefan sucks, and they shove each other. And so Raymond says, well, I can take Stefan's place if you knight me. So Raymond is currently a squire, not a knight, and only knights are allowed to participate in this trial. And so Raymond says, well, I'll be a knight if someone knights me. And so Raymond asks Dunk to knight him, and Dunk hesitates. He says, I shouldn't. Even though, like, Dunk needs this. Dunk absolutely needs Raymond to join him, or else Dunk will have his hand and his foot cut off. But Dunk hesitates. And I think this is another really strong hint that Dunk is not really a knight. I think the reason why Dunk doesn't want to knight Raymond is that Dunk knows that Dunk was never knighted by Arlen, and so if Dunk knights Raymond, it's like, it's fake, it's false, it's a lie. And Dunk doesn't want Raymond to be a false knight. Dunk doesn't want to pass on the taint of a fake knighthood, a fake oath. Under the moral philosophy of knighthood, that would be a really terrible thing to do. And, like, for what other possible reason might Dunk be hesitating? I mean, I guess you could interpret it as, like, Dunk knows that Raymond is only a squire, and Raymond is not very skilled. Like, Dunk saw Raymond getting beaten up by Stefan in episode 1, so maybe Dunk is like, Raymond might get killed if I knight him, and if he joins the trial. I guess that's another possible interpretation. But I think the real reason is that Dunk is not a knight. Arlen didn't knight Dunk, and Dunk hesitates to pass on that false knighthood. And so Lionel is like, what are you doing? I'll do it if you're not going to do it, Dunk. And yeah, look at this long, awkward, lingering moment. Like, Lionel is looking at Dunk like, why are you not doing it? Why are you not knighting Raymond? I think it's because Dunk's not really a knight. And so then we get this interesting sort of slow sequence where Lionel says the vow of becoming a knight. In the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. In the name of the mother, I charge you to protect the young and innocent. In the book, it says, in the name of the maid, I charge you to protect all women. And that's as far as the vow goes in the books, as far as we've seen. We've never seen the full vow, and I would love to see the full vow. Because these vows, like the father, the warrior, the mother, the maid, those are all gods of the 7. And so the other gods are like the smith and the crone and the stranger. And I'd love to know if there are vows for those gods as well. Like, the stranger is the god of death. And it's like, I wonder, like, is there a vow to the god of death in the knight's vow that all knights swear? I think that's an interesting question. And I think, maybe the reason why the full oath has not been revealed in any of the books is that maybe George Martin hadn't made up his mind yet about what all the oaths should be. Because I don't know, I think it could be interesting. Like, what vow does a knight make to the god of death? Not today? Or, like, maybe knights swear to die honorably. Maybe knights swear to die to a good cause or something. I don't know. So Dunk is currently still missing a champion. Dunk still needs another champion. But, Dunk's in this dramatic moment, and he looks up and he sees Arlen. And it's like, like Dunk later in his speech, Dunk says something like, your sons will follow on in your footsteps and your values. And I think in that line, Dunk is kind of implying that, Arlen is like a father to him. Arlen certainly is the closest thing that Dunk ever had to a father. And so I think in this moment, Dunk is like, in his mind, he's like looking to his father figure for advice in this time of need. It's like Simba looking up at Mustafa and going, "Father, tell me what to do in my time of crisis." And I think it's hysterical that Arlen looks down from the heavens and he shrugs. It's such a goofy expression. Arlen's like, "I don't know." And so I think it contributes to that idea that, like, yes, Arlen was good to Dunk, and like, yes, Arlen taught Dunk the values of a good knight, but also Arlen was not a great knight, and Arlen was maybe not a great man. And Arlen is like, "Yeah, I don't know, dude. I was never in this situation. I don't know how you're going to get out of this one, mate. You might be screwed." I think that's the energy that we get from Arlen here. And of course, this is just happening inside Dunk's head, and this moment doesn't even happen in the book. But I think it's really interesting that Dunk's like, I really wish I had some insight from my father figure right now, but I guess I have to wing it. And I think that's something that we got to do sometimes in our lives. So for a moment, everything seems lost because Dunk desperately needs one more champion. And so Dunk makes a dramatic speech. And this is like his Braveheart moment. This is his big epic speech. Here's the best look we get at Humphrey Beesbury with his yellow moustache. Bees in the chat. And Dunk gives his epic speech. So Dunk needs to convince one more knight to side with him in the trial by combat, or else Dunk is going to die. Because currently, Prince Arian has Donald, Roland, and Willem, and his father, Prince Maker, and his brother, Prince Darren, and Stefan Fossaway. He has 7 on his side. But currently, Dunk only has Humphrey Harding, Humphrey Beesbury, Robin Riesling, Lionel Baratheon, and Raymond Fossaway. Dunk has 6. He needs 1 more. So he gives the speech. And he says, "I know that none of you remember Sir Arlen, but I was his squire, and we served many of you, ate at your tables, slept in your halls." Because let's remember, like, for about 10 years, Arlen was a hedge knight, Dunk was his squire. They traveled all around Westeros, serving as a mercenary, serving as a guard, serving in wars. Arlen fought at the Redgrass Field. Arlen's nephew Roger died in service of the Targaryens at the Redgrass. We saw that Arlen took a wound fighting for the Dondarrions in the Red Mountains against the Vulture King. And, Dunk participated in those conflicts as well. We don't get a lot of details about, like, did Dunk fight? Did Dunk kill people in combat alongside Arlen as his squire? We don't really know how much experience Arlen has with that kind of thing, but how much experience Dunk has with that kind of thing. But it's beautiful how Dunk evokes Arlen in this moment as a way of making this personal. Because Dunk talks about how Arlen trained him to be a knight, and it's not just about fighting, it's about values. It's about defending the innocent, and that's what Dunk did. So Dunk is saying, like, we all are sworn to protect the innocent. All these dozens of knights in the audience, they all swore to protect the innocent, but Dunk was the only one who protected the innocent Tansel. And it's ironic, it's deeply ironic, because it seems to be that Dunk is not a real knight. Dunk wasn't knighted by Arlen, and yet Dunk, the one guy who isn't a knight, is the one guy who did keep the vow and actually fulfill the promise of protecting the innocent. And so, according to the laws of the moral code of knighthood, every one of these people in the stands should be standing up to fight for Dunk, because Dunk did the right thing, and Dunk was protecting the innocent. Someone should come and help Dunk. But when Dunk makes this epic speech, the person who stands up is this guy, Otho Bracken, the Brute of Bracken, who then farts. He's making fun of Dunk. He's farting in his general direction. He's undermining the epic moment. It's like in episode 1, where Dunk is feeling all epic with his sword, but then he has diarrhea to undercut the moment. They're doing the same thing here. This bit isn't in the book. Otho Bracken's fart is not in the book, and I think it's like up to taste whether you like the addition of the fart, because it does undercut the dramatic moment in a way that maybe makes it less epic, the beautiful dramatic speech. Although, I guess they're trying to do something thematic by saying that, it's the same situation as episode 1, where, Dunk's dreams were shit on, but it still pays off because Baelor eventually joins Dunk's side. So I don't know whether the fart adds anything. Like, they're trying to be funny. I don't know if it's funny enough to justify adding a fart to the most epic moment of this episode, but that's what they do. But anyway, so Otho Bracken, he's got a little bit of lore to him. Otho Bracken is a knight of House Bracken. The Brackens are a house from the Riverlands, and the Brackens are locked in an endless ancient struggle against the Blackwoods. And we see that in House of the Dragon, there are Brackens and Blackwoods fighting each other. In the time of Game of Thrones in the books, the Blackwoods and Brackens are still fighting each other. Aegon Targaryen the Fourth, King Aegon the Fourth, was involved in the Bracken-Blackwood dispute because he had a bastard with the Brackens named Bittersteel, and he had a bastard with the Blackwoods named Bloodraven. And Bloodraven is the magical one-eyed tree sorcerer. And so there's a long history of Bracken-Blackwood shenanigans. And this guy, Otho Bracken, he killed a Blackwood 3 years ago at a tournament. This was at King's Landing, and Bracken killed Lord Quentin Blackwood. He smashed in Quentin's helmet and the face beneath it. And that was, like, presumably an accident. People do sometimes accidentally kill each other at tournaments. Wait, I don't know if this was meant to be a tournament melee or a tournament joust that then continued on foot, but in any case, this guy, Otho Bracken, killed Lord Blackwood in a tournament, and the Blackwoods are understandably angry about it. And so the Hedge Knight book mentions that, like, yeah, Otho Bracken is here, and the Blackwoods are at, like, the opposite end of the camp to them, because the Blackwoods and Brackens hate each other and are staying away from each other. So Otho Bracken doesn't do a whole lot in this book, but in the later Dunk and Egg books, it mentions Otho Bracken a bunch, and people are like, ooh, that Otho Bracken, he sure is formidable, he sure is a cool guy. And then it mentions that, oh, Otho Bracken, it sounds like he might become the Lord of Bracken soon. And so the books really build up this Otho Bracken character, which makes fans think, maybe he'll be important in later books. The author, George R. Martin, recently said that he's recently been writing new Dunk and Egg stories set in the North and set in the Riverlands. So the Northern Dunk and Egg story is probably going to be the fourth Dunk and Egg book, working title The She-Wolves of Winterfell, which seems to be about, like, a Stark succession dispute. And the Riverlands Dunk and Egg book, some people speculate, is titled The Village Hero. That's something that George has mentioned before. And some people speculate that this guy, Otho Bracken, he might be central to that story, The Village Hero, set in the Riverlands, the fifth Dunk and Egg book. Of course, all of that is assuming that George R. Martin actually finishes these books, which he's been threatening to write for some 20 years. So, don't hold your breath is my advice on that. But there are hints of future plans for future books going on here. Now, in the book, Otho Bracken doesn't fart. In the book, Dunk comes up to Otho Bracken and says, hey, Otho, everyone knows that you are a great champion. Please join my cause. By the old gods and the new, I beg you, my cause is just. Join me, Otho. And then Otho in the book says, well, that may be, but it is your cause, not mine. I know you not, boy. So in the book it says, well, Otho at least had the grace to reply. Because in the book, Dunk comes up and he talks to Leo Longthorn Tyrell, he talks to Lord Daemon Lannister, the Grey Lion, and he says, please help me. And they don't even reply to him, they just ignore him. And so, obviously, part of what's going on here is politics. Like, all of these great lords, they don't want to go against the royal family. They don't want to publicly fight against Three Kingsguard and Prince Aerion and Prince Maekar and Prince Daeron. Like, that is like political suicide, going and fighting against princes. And, maybe killing princes or being killed by princes. Like, it is a very brave thing to go against them. But also it's like a class thing. Like, people don't want to, risk themselves to protect a humble hedge knight. There's nothing to be gained politically. So it's political selfishness, and it's political cowardice, and it's moral cowardice. Why don't the powerful, important people in the world do the right thing and side with the underdogs? Why doesn't that happen? We see Red in the crowd a few times. Red is the woman, the sex worker who Dunk met in episode 1, who made fun of Dunk and also gave Dunk advice. I mean, Red and Beanie told Dunk, hey Dunk, maybe you shouldn't join the tournament because you might die. I mean, Red might have been right on that one, because it's looking like Dunk might be about to die. So anyway, it looks like Dunk is screwed. Everyone's laughing at him. Everyone's farting at him. And he gets his big line, has courage deserted the noble houses of Westeros? Are there no true knights among you? So this is the big epic line. And it really encapsulates that irony that, like, as I said, I think that Dunk is not really a knight. I think that he was not really knighted by Arlen, and yet Dunk is a true knight. He upholds the values of protecting the innocent. He upholds the vow of knighthood, even though Dunk never actually took that vow, is the great irony. And so sort of the thesis of this story in some ways, or one of the ideas, is that it's the humble people and it's the people who have nothing who are sometimes in a position to do the right thing. Whereas the people who have everything, they have something to lose. And the people who have power, they didn't get there by doing the right thing and sticking up for the underdogs. They got there by being selfish. And so it's a criticism of power structures themselves. It's a criticism of any unequal society, and suggesting that there is moral corruption inherent in protecting your position of great political power. Are there no true knights among you? And then Baelor rides in. So in the books, everyone thinks this is Prince Valar at first, because this is Valar's armor. So we saw Prince Valar, Baelor's son, wearing this armor in the previous episode. And the reason why Baelor is wearing Valar's armor is because Baelor wasn't planning on riding in this tournament. Baelor wasn't planning on participating. So when he decides to join this trial and help Dunk, he has to borrow his son Valar's armor. And so for a moment in the book, everyone's like, oh, Prince Valar has come to join Baelor. But it's actually Baelor. Has come to join Dunk, but it's actually Baelor. And this is something that George does a few times in the books. He has, like, people wearing other people's armor, and people mistake who they are. Like in the second book, at the Battle of the Blackwater, when Stannis is trying to take King's Landing, and Stannis gets stopped by Tyrion's wildfire and by Tywin Lannister and the Tyrells arriving at the last minute. In that battle, in the book, Garland Tyrell, Loras's brother, wears Renly Baratheon's green armor. And so everyone thinks it's Renly, even though Renly recently died. So everyone's like, oh my god, it's the ghost of Renly Baratheon. The ghost of Renly Baratheon has come to win the battle. I think it's a bit like in the Iliad, when Patroclus wears Achilles' armor at the Trojan War to make everyone think, oh my god, it's Achilles, the best warrior ever, he's come to fight in the battle, but it's actually Patroclus. And doesn't Patroclus, like, die in Achilles' armor? Isn't that what happens? So I think that that's a sort of mythological thing that George Martin is evoking here. But, like, in terms of like the meaning here, I mean, you know, for a moment it seemed like all was lost, but someone does the right thing, and it's the goddamn prince. It's the heir to the throne. So, like, all that stuff we were saying about, like, the corruption of the world, and how, you know, politics and power is inherently corrupt, and, like, no one with power does the right thing. It's like, well, okay, hang on. It is possible for a powerful politician to do the right thing. Some princes are good people. Some knights keep their vows. And so it's an incredibly, like, positive, optimistic, validating moment, reminding us that there can be hope, and, like, powerful people can choose to do the right thing. It can happen sometimes, theoretically. So it's a really beautiful, inspiring moment. And, like, and this is a payoff to what was happening in the earlier scenes. Something that the show adds, that the show does more of, is Baelor questioning his values and his options and his choices. When Dunk was asking, like, didn't you swear the same vow? Do you really believe that Tansel was being treasonous? Dunk was challenging Baelor to do the right thing. And when Baelor was saying, how good a knight are you, to Dunk, I think Baelor was also questioning himself. And he was saying, well, am I a good person? Am I a good knight? What's the right thing to do? It is messed up. Like, Maker comes up to Baelor and says, hey, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you siding against me, your brother, and siding against Aerion, your nephew, in a fight to the death Why are you going against your family? Dunk assaulted Prince Aryan. Why are you siding with the man who attacked my son? What the fuck are you doing? Like, very reasonable for Maekar to ask those questions, especially when Darren is claiming that Dunk abducted Egg. Darren is claiming that Dunk egg-napped Maekar's son. So, like, what is Baelor doing? Like, Maekar's perspective makes so much sense here. But on the other hand, Baelor is also right that Dunk protected the innocent Tansel, as everyone is sworn to do. And so in turn, Baelor is protecting Dunk, as Baelor swore to do when he swore to be a knight who protects the innocent. And so I love the clash of values here. I love a story where people in conflict both have understandable perspectives. Because I think the truth at the end of the day in the real world is that every person has reasons and motivations and feelings that are valid in their heads, at least, in every conflict. And we've got to endeavor to see both sides. We've got to have empathy for our enemies. And so Baelor says, the gods will decide if Dunk was right or wrong. And we get the Game of Thrones theme music. So, like, it's really wonderful how in episode 1, Dunk got a little moment of the Game of Thrones theme music, but then it was suddenly interrupted by diarrhea. The epic moment was cut short. But here in this show, it's like, no, like, epicness does exist in this world. Like, yes, there's puking, and there's farting, and there's burping, and there's spitting, and there's giant old man dong. There is all of that, but there is also heroism, there is also hope, there is also optimism, and God save us, there's also politicians making good and ethical decisions in the interests of the common man. What a fantasy show this is. So yeah, it's cool. It's a great, hopeful, optimistic moment. So, what's the situation now? The situation now is that there's 7 men who are going to fight against 7 men. It's a fight that goes on until either Aryan is dead or Dunk is dead, or Aryan surrenders and withdraws his claim. And also, like, I guess maybe Dunk has the option of surrendering as well, but he would lose his hand and his foot at least. So that's the situation. It's the 3 Kingsguard, Willem, Roland, Donal, plus Prince Maekar, plus Prince Darren, plus Sir Stefan on Aryan's side, versus Dunk's side of Humphrey Harding, Humphrey Beesbury, Robin Riesling, Lionel Baratheon, Raymond Fossaway, and Prince Baelor Breakspear Targaryen. Now, Baelor Targaryen, at least in the books, is said to be maybe the greatest knight alive. He is like maybe like one of the best warriors alive, so that's great. He's a veteran of the Redgrass Field. He's the Hammer. He's Breakspear. He's a pretty like quiet, reserved guy, but he's very good with a sword. Humphrey Harding is a great knight, as we know. Humphrey Beesbury, we don't know much about. Robin Riesling is a good jouster, at least. Lionel Baratheon is one of the best knights around. In the books, Lionel Baratheon is physically huge as well. He's very tall and powerful. Bit more so than Daniel Ings. Raymond Fossaway might be useless, I guess, because Raymond Fossaway became a knight, like, today. Raymond's not all that powerful. But Lionel and Baelor Breakspear and Humphrey Harding are heavy hitters, at least. While on Aryan's side, the Kingsguard are probably very, very skilled. Maekar is a formidable warrior. Stefan Fossaway is a skilled warrior. Aryan seems to be a pretty good warrior, while Darren the Drunken is pretty useless. So, I think a betting man would probably bet on Aryan's side, probably. But both sides have some powerful warriors on them. And this fight will determine Dunk's future. How incredible. How exciting. Now, I have got to tell you about Dunk Time, because my rotten, wormy cousin, AltShiftX, has been doing a weekly podcast show with Glidus. Every week they're talking about A Night of the Seven Kingdoms in great depth. They had a theory last week that everything is Gwyn Ashford's fault. Like, Gwyn Ashford is the reason why Maekar went off to look for his sons, and the reason why Aryan misbehaved, and this whole fracas is Gwyn Ashford's fault. The Grand Gwyn-spiracy. If you want to hear about the Grand Gwyn-spiracy, that's in Dunk Time, episode 3, I think. And you can listen to Dunk Time along with 60 hours more of exclusive Alt Shift X and Glidus videos on Nebula. That includes the fake Jon Snow, which, I'm not kidding, is a 22-hour-long video. There is a 22-hour-long video about Jon Snow on Nebula with Glidus and Swift that you can watch right now. The links are below. You can get 50% off an annual subscription using my link, and it's a really good way to support Alt Shift X. It would help me out if you'd subscribe to Nebula. And you get access not only to exclusive Alt Shift X stuff and exclusive Alt Swift X stuff, you also get stuff from many, many wonderful creators like H-Bomber Guy, Lindsay Ellis, Tail Foundry, Man Carrying Thing. Lots of wonderful creators are on Nebula. And it'd be cool if you check it out. All right. Now, this episode, I would say, is very faithful to the book. Last episode added a lot of extra stuff that wasn't in the book, but I would say that this episode doesn't add a whole lot. It just makes some sort of small changes from the books. It's one of the most faithful episodes to a book that I've ever seen of anything, actually. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find many adaptations of books on big shows that are more faithful than this one. This one's very faithful. It did add the fart, but otherwise it was pretty faithful. And I think that it might be time to join the spoiler zone soon. But first we will respond to some of your kind donations and super chats. So I'm going to try and answer as many of your questions as I can. And if you do want to make a donation or a question, the best way to do it is with the Streamlabs link in the video description. Jack says, I like that before his fight with Arian, other than a brief glimpse of him beating up an old dying Sir Arlen, we had never actually seen Dunk fight. We have no indication of his skill as a knight, and so we don't actually know his chances of winning the joust. Yeah, I mean, we got a little sort of gesture at that in the scene with Baelor, because Baelor says, like, how good a knight are you really? And Dunk is like, well, Sir Arlen tried to teach me how to use a sword and a lance. And Baelor's like, huh, okay. So, like, the implication is that Dunk is not very well trained. And yeah, we did get that brief glimpse of Dunk sparring with Arlen, which a shot which kind of puzzles me, because at that flashback, I think, is meant to be set in, like, the last few days before Arlen died. And we saw that Arlen had that wound on his arm. So I don't understand why Arlen was sparring, like fighting with Dunk, training with Dunk, while Arlen is A, wounded, and B, about to die shortly. I mean, maybe that just speaks to Arlen's tenacity. He had a chin cut from granite, right? Maybe that just speaks to Arlen's tenacity and will, that he was like training and fighting even as he was dying. That is pretty badass. But yeah, I think the indication is that Dunk is really not a good fighter. Although, as Dunk thinks in the books, Dunk does have the advantage of being very big and very strong and very tall, which certainly helps when you're in a fight to the death with a sword. Thank you, J-Bro, who says, I like to think in episode 1, when Dunk was talking to the Kingsguard, his answer was more positive. Like, Dunk says, how does a crabber's son become a Kingsguard? And Donald says, the same way my father became a crabber. Maybe like the way that Donald became a crabber, the way that Donald's father became a crabber, is by being good at what he does. Yeah, you might be right, J-Bro. I think in our video we said that, you know, the idea of the same way my father became a crabber, like maybe Donald is implying that money is how Donald was successful and how Donald's father was successful, and maybe it implies corruption, because corruption of the Kingsguard is something that comes up in the books. But yeah, you're right. I think another legitimate interpretation is like maybe Donald is just really competent. Maybe he's just a really good fighter, and that's how he joined the Kingsguard. And so equally, maybe Donald's father became a really successful crabber because he's really good at crabbing. Maybe he's just a master crabber, you know, Crab King. Maybe he's just really good at making fermented crab, like in Game of Thrones. So yeah, I agree. There's multiple interpretations there. Thank you, Vil, who says, does Baelor have purple eyes like the other Targaryens in the books, even though he doesn't have white hair? Well, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I can check my notes real quick. So Baelor Targaryen is described as having dark, grey-peppered, short-cropped hair. He's got a strong jaw, clean-shaven. He's got a nose that's been broken a couple of times. He dresses plainly. As far as I'm aware, I don't think Baelor Breakspear's eye color is ever described. Yeah, I don't think it's described, which is interesting. Oh, dark eyes. Okay, he has dark eyes. Okay, yeah, so I think in the books, Baelor Breakspear has dark eyes as opposed to purple eyes, which is like a Dornish feature that is inherited from his Martell mother. And that's another reason why some people don't trust Baelor, because they see him as like a Dornishman rather than a real Targaryen. And yeah, they said in the behind the scenes making of feature last week, they said that the actor who plays Valar has heterochromia. The actor who plays Valar has two different coloured eyes. And so they decided to give Bertie Carvel, who plays Baelor, they decided to give Baelor two different coloured eyes. It's pretty subtle. It's not easy to see, but you can see it even in this shot on screen here. Bertie Carvel is wearing one contact lens so that his eyes are different colours. And they decided to add that just as a tiny little detail, just to connect Baelor to his son, Valar. Which is a really, like, interesting little detail to add. Like, the showrunner Ira Parker was saying that, yeah, like, no one's gonna notice this. Like, it's such a tiny little detail. And I like that the effect is subtle. Like, they weren't, like, it's not super obvious. But if you look closely, you can see that Baelor has two different coloured eyes. And that's not in the book, but it's something that they just added to connect him to Valar. In the books, Shiera Seastar has two different coloured eyes, and I think Daemon's mother has two different coloured eyes. Maybe you can choose to theorize that heterochromia reflects the weird chimeric dragon blood inside the Targaryens. Like maybe Targaryens are half dragon, and that's why they have heterochromia in some symbolic way. Tyrion has two different coloured eyes in the books as well. Maybe that means that he's half Targaryen. Ooh. Thank you, Patty, who says CH rocks. Thank you, Beth Illustrates, who says long time listener, first time caller. Thanks for endless hours of making me laugh while I draw. Yeah, thanks, Beth. Dunk the Hunk says, Darren is so pathetic, I love him. Yeah, George Martin is like a master of writing like depressed sad boys who are like deeply charismatic and witty and sympathetic. And George Martin is also a master of writing people who do bad things and also are still like on some level sympathetic. Like Tyrion is someone who does bad things but is still sympathetic. And I like that they added a little bit of vulnerability to Aerion this episode as well. I mean, he's still a monster, but we get a little bit more interiority with him. Thank you, Bella Grebs, who says, I've been watching Alt Shift X videos since high school. I'm about to turn 26 and catching my first live. Hell yeah, Bella. Thanks for joining. Thank you, Gerald's 2 cents, who says, did Dana the Defiant urge her son, Daemon Blackfyre, to rebel? Yeah, so Dana the Defiant was the mother of Daemon Blackfyre, and she was locked up in the Maiden Vault. Her brother, was it brother, King Baelor the Blessed, locked up Dana and her 2 sisters in the Maiden Vault because Baelor did not want to be tempted to have sex with them. But Dana escaped from the Maiden Vault, and she went and had sex with Aegon the Unworthy, and that's where Daemon Blackfyre came from. And we don't know much about Dana Targaryen the Defiant, but I think it is reasonable to speculate that maybe she urged Daemon Blackfyre to rebel. I mean, one of the interesting things about Daemon Blackfyre is that, like, it's not really clear if Daemon, like, really hated his brother Daeron Targaryen. We know that Bittersteel was really pissed off. Daemon's brother Bittersteel was real angry about everything. Bittersteel especially hated Bloodraven. And Bloodraven sided with King Daeron, the current king, while Bittersteel sided with Daemon Blackfire, the rebel. And like it is said that, you know, the Blackfire Rebellion was less about Daemon hating Daeron. It was kind of more about Bittersteel hating Bloodraven. And that even connects to the Brackens and the Blackwoods, because Bloodraven was a Blackwood and Bittersteel was a Bracken. So it's like, what was the Blackfire Rebellion really about? Maybe it just comes down to those bloody Blackwoods and Brackens, their hatred against each other. I think there's this really old theory that went around the community years and years ago that was arguing that like everything is Brackens versus Blackwoods, and even like the current wars of like young Griff versus Targaryens or whatever, and like the current war of the Five Kings, it's all just like still a proxy war between Bloodraven and Bittersteel. Because I mean, Bloodraven, in fairness, is still alive, at least in the books. He is the three-eyed crow who's teaching Bran. And so you can kind of see this whole series as like Bloodraven moving pawns around against the Blackfires and against young Griff and against Varys and all of that. It's like maybe everything is still just an elaborate conspiracy and an elaborate fight between the Brackens and Blackwoods. But yeah, look, the exact details of like who really wanted the Blackfire Rebellion to start is complicated. I mean, part of it is always about those ambitious minor houses who want to be more powerful. Because the people who were Targaryen loyalists in the Blackfire Rebellion were like mostly the great houses, like the Arryns and Tyrells and the Tullys, and like I forget which specific ones, but most of the really powerful houses sided with the Targaryens in the rebellion. The houses who sided with the Blackfires were like the Peaks and the Ironwoods and all of these like secondary houses who were not as powerful, but they would like to be. So, like, a war like this, it doesn't happen just because one guy wants to start a war. It happens because a lot of different, like, power blocks and a lot of different houses and a lot of different influential people, they want change. They want to shake things up. They want to, you know, settle some scores. So, you know, was Dana the Defiant one of those people who wanted a war for some, you know, personal ambition or something? Maybe. We don't know. I think that George Martin would love to write a series of novels about the Blackfire Rebellions, but whether that will happen, we don't know. I think George has said that he would like to write novels about King Aegon IV, the Unworthy, and that could lead into a Blackfire novel, I think. Gerald says, do you think Dana poisoned Viserys I? I have not heard that one. I don't know. I don't know about that one. Thank you, Jay, who says, so much to love about this episode, but of course the number one amongst those is Humphrey Beesbury's bright yellow moustache. As a bookverse nerd, I loved getting to see who I believe to be Tybalt and Daemon Lannister on screen. Yeah, so there was one Lannister knight in the night jousting in episode 2. And unfortunately, I don't think if we know whether that's Tybalt Lannister or Daemon Lannister. We did see a Lannister competing, but is that Tybalt or is that Lord Daemon? We don't know. Unfortunately, we can't be sure, I don't think. Because I don't think the credits name the Lannister knight at all, so 'tis a mystery. B's in the chat for the yellow moustache. Thank you, Kennard, who says, spoiler zone theory. Alright, I'll get to that later. No spoilers yet. Thank you, Muar Dweeb, who says, the extra dialogue between Dunk and Baelor recontextualizes Baelor's line to Maekar later. He protected the innocent, as if Dunk convinced him, and I love it. Yeah, I totally agree. Because, like, one of the interesting things about this adaptation is that they managed to give each episode a theme, and they give each episode a focal character, and yet they still are faithful to the book. Like, most of the words in this show are taken from the book, and yet they manage to at the same time restructure the story to give it more of a thematic focus and more of a character arc in 6 parts, as opposed to the one continuous short story. I think it's really, really impressive how they do that. And so the first episode was very much about Dunk constructing his identity as Duncan the Tall. The second episode was very much about Egg. It's the Egg episode. Oh no, the episode 3 is the egg episode. Episode 2 is the Arlen episode. And episode 4, I think, is the Baelor episode. They managed to sort of frame this around Baelor's decision of whether he's going to fight for Dunk. And so, yeah, I think it's really impressive how they do that. Thank you, Just Kidding K, who says, I swear every time Arian speaks in front of his father, Makar just absolutely embodies the Ben Affleck smoking meme. Yeah, it's really fun with Makar and Arian, because I think that we can sympathize with Makar's frustration with Arian, because Arian is so terrible and annoying, and he never does the right thing. And he's an enormous embarrassment to Makar, as well as being morally repugnant. So we can sympathize with Makar's frustration, but at the same time, Makar is doing himself no favors because he's such a bad dad. Because he's like so harsh and uncompromising and mean. And, you know, even little Egg just says that, yeah, I don't know Makar. I don't understand Makar. There's no emotional connection there. So it's like, man, it's sad. I think Makar is sad. Thank you, Freddy, who says, I feel like giving Makar's line in Lord Ashford's Hall to Arian takes some weight from his character. It wasn't as impactful coming from Arian. I think you're referring to the line where Makar says, well, if you can't find champions to fight for you, then you're guilty and you die. It couldn't be more plain. And yeah, that's a line that Makar has in the book, whereas in the show, Arian has that line. And yeah, I guess Makar has a little bit more authority and weight when he says that, as opposed to the show. Maybe in the show they gave it to Arian to try and make him more of a threat and an antagonist, you know. I think that Makar in the show comes off as a little bit uninvolved and unauthoritative, because Makar's always going, yeah, screw you, screw them, I don't care, whatever. I think Makar comes across as a bit like uninvolved and nonchalant and uncaring. Whereas in the book, I think Makar is a bit more plugged in, he's a bit more aware, he's a bit more involved, he's a bit more authoritative. And so, yeah, I guess it's a shame that they take away that sense of authority a bit. I think the reason why they changed that is to make Makar more distinct from Baelor, you know, making him showing his frustration and his rudeness and such. Thank you, Nesty Boy, who says, this episode was peak. I was wondering, Sir Shiftus, if you'd consider making some videos about tough voyaging. Yeah. Well, we have done some little patron chats about tough voyaging. Maybe I'll put that on the Nebula. Yeah, I'll put one of those on the Nebula. So I'll put a link in the description when that's up there. So if you want to sign up at nebula.tv/AltShiftX, I'll put our tough voyaging little chat there. We have done, I think Aziz from History of Westeros and Glidus were in some of those chats. So yeah, I'll confirm. But yeah, we have recorded some chats about tough voyaging. I'll put it on Nebula. Link in the description if you want to sign up and listen to that. Thank you, Saminator, who says, finished the ep, loved it, never made the live streams, so happy. Thank you, sirs, for your good works. Loved Lionel knighting Raymond the most. What was your favorite moment? What was my favorite moment? I mean, I think that, like, Baelor rocking up was handled really well, because it feels really earned, it feels inspiring, and like the Game of Thrones theme, the use of the Game of Thrones theme music, I think the music was really well used. So I thought that was wonderful. Are there other moments that I thought were better? I mean, I think the drama that they added between Dunk and Egg in the opening scene was a good addition. I think just like seeing how hurt and sad and rejected Egg is just so powerful. Like, just even this body language with him like crouched in the corner of the cell. I mean, it's so sad. You can't not but feel for Dexter, feel for Egg in this moment. I think that was really nicely done. Samuel says, happy Waitangi Day from Uluru, Australia. Love, Samwise. Thanks, Saminator. Thank you, I don't know, bro, who says, love the ending tension between the Westerosi and Targaryens. You get a sense that most of them deep down never liked or accepted Targaryen rule. Yeah, that's a sense that we don't really have in this book. But it makes sense that, you know, the people don't like being ruled over, especially by people who they perceive as outsiders. So Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to add. Thank you to Burv, who says, I love this show. Thank you, Triceratops, who says, having this on while working from home makes it easier for me to get actual work done. Thanks for the company. Thank you, Triceratops. Thank you, Wilburger. Welcome, Wilburger. Wilburger makes some cool videos about the Elder Scrolls. So if you want to see some kooky Elder Scrolls videos, check out Wilburger. Wilburger says, oh my god, what an ep, mostly straight from the books. I loved the tonal shift. Shift. The shift from the shift to serious works so well for this ep and the stakes. Just want to say hey and send my love for you and what you do. Thanks so much, Wilburger. Shout out to Wilburger. Thank you, Oakenshield, who says, I really wish they would have kept Otho Bracken's original line from the book and let the tone remain serious without feeling the need to undercut the tension with comedy. A fart joke kind of cheapens the gravity of the moment. Yeah, I feel you, Oakenshield. I'm not quite convinced that the fart was a worthy addition, especially on top of episode 1's pooping and episode 2's penis and like Raymond's burping and Plummer's spitting and like there's so much like icky graphic stuff that they've added to the show. It's like, do we have to have it every single episode adding some like kooky gross out moment? It's a matter of taste. Everyone's comedic taste is different. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like they're trying a little bit too hard to gross us out. Doing it sometimes is fine, but doing it in like every episode is like, okay, you know? But it's a matter of taste. Thank you, Borsato, who says, even knowing the story from your previous Dunk and Egg videos, I definitely got emotional seeing everyone standing up for Dunk. Thanks for your work to make awesome videos. Thank you, Borsato. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I'm sure in some ways this story hits harder if you don't know how it ends, if you haven't read the books. But yeah, I mean, even as someone who read these books years ago, I think that the emotional moments absolutely still land. And I think that has a lot to do with the wonderful performances by Peter Claffey and Dexter Sol Ansel as Dunk and Egg. Thank you, Salmonator, who says, I love you. Please read Forgotten Realms, starting with Drust. I don't know what Drust is, but I'll look into Forgotten Realms. Sus Speaks says, what actor would you love to be in A Song of Ice and Fire? I want to see a version of Robert's Rebellion, but every character is played by Christopher Walken. Thank you, DumbGamers22, who says, 1, I do like how the Baylor side plot still has that family/honor theme that's been present since the first book. Yeah, I think one of the fundamental, like, moral dilemmas that comes up over and over is people choosing between family and morality. I think one of the central conflicts and challenges for so many characters in all these stories is we want to do the right thing for the people we love. We want to be close to the people we love. We want to help the people we love. But also sometimes the people we love suck. And also there are sometimes more important, consequential problems in the world. And sometimes we want to try and do the right thing for the world and for our like professional obligations, for our oaths, for our promises. And sometimes you can't look after your family and do the right thing for the broader world. And I think that's a very real, very relatable problem. And I think it's something that George Martin comes back to again and again. Dumb Gamers says, sorry, Gwyn, but I'll be naming Dunk as our Queen of Love and Beauty. Punishment for the hashtag Gwynspiracy. Hell yeah. Yeah. So you know, let's not forget. Let's not forget. Let's not lose sight of the fact that this entire tournament is still meant to be Gwyn Ashford's birthday party. This whole tournament is being held by Lord Ashford, ostensibly to celebrate the birthday party of that girl Gwyn. And her birthday party's not really going all that well, if we're being honest. I don't think Gwyn wanted 14 men to beat each other to death at her birthday party. I'm guessing that probably isn't what she had in mind for her birthday party. She probably wanted pass the parcel and maybe a cake. She's getting 14 knights beating each other to death in her backyard. That's a downer. The tournament is meant to culminate in the 5 champions choosing a Queen of Love and Beauty. And the polite thing to do would be to choose the birthday girl as the Queen of Love and Beauty. But yes, like Dumb Gamers, it would be very funny if Dunk was chosen as the Queen of Love and Beauty instead. Wouldn't that be delightful? I desperately hope that Dunk not only wins his Trial of 7, but gets crowned with the garland of flowers and named the Queen of Love and Beauty. That would be delightful. And yes, the Gwynspiracy most certainly is afoot. That's something that's talked about in Dunk Time. And you can listen to Dunk Time on Nebula. Did I mention that you can listen to every episode of Dunk Time and 60 hours more of exclusive Swift and Glidus content? And you can not only watch this on Nebula, you can also listen on any podcast app, ad-free. And you can do that by signing up at Nebula. The link to the Nebula podcast feed is in the video description of this live stream. So you can listen to all of the Dunk Time episodes as soon as the Seven Kingdoms episode airs, and you'll get the Dunk Time episode in your podcast app to listen to while you drive or go to the gym or ride into battle upon your warhorse Wrath. So if you want to sign up at Nebula at the link below, that would help out this channel. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Inazuma says, what's up with the color grading / lighting being so dark? From the tents in episode 1 to the Kingsguard lighting in episode 4. Yeah, look, the answer is I don't know, but it does seem to be a problem, like a widespread problem, doesn't it? I mean, notoriously, in Game of Thrones Season 8, the Battle at Winterfell episode was so dark that no one could see what was happening. Especially when, like, the dragons were fighting in the sky. It was just, like, blurry CGI. Everyone complained about that. But my theory is that it's got a lot to do with the different kinds of screens that people are watching these episodes on. Because, like, some people, and presumably the people who make these shows, are watching these shows on, like, beautiful, big, crisp OLED screens with, like, 0 latency and perfect resolution. But then the people who are watching these episodes are often watching over dodgy internet on a streaming service on a laptop in a room that's got other lights in it, and it's all compressed because of their internet connection. That my theory is that because people are watching in different ways in different places, it's really hard to get the color grading right and getting the lighting right for everyone to see perfectly in every different scenario. I imagine that there's no perfect way to do it. Because the ideal conditions on, like, some big OLED TV in a perfectly dark room, like, maybe it looks great if you do that, but most people aren't doing that. That's my guess. Thank you, John, who says, hey, Shift, love your channel. I heard that the showrunners are making a bold move and having the prostitutes join the trial by combat. Is this true? Look, I think that Dunk's chances would be improved if the sex workers Red, Daisy, and Beanie joined Dunk's side. I think they might be formidable if you gave Beanie a Morning Star and Daisy a Wall Lance. I think that Makar would quake in his boots. Thank you, It's the Life of Pash, who says, the scene where Baelor came in was so hype. The score and his speech was perfect. Never been hyped like that since the Jon Snow Targaryen reveal from GOT. It's a good moment. I sure hope nothing bad happens next episode. Thank you, Jassar. Thank you, Jassar, who says, fuck Winds of Winter, give me more Dunk and Egg. I mean, that might happen. That might happen. George R.R. Martin has been giving the same progress update for the Winds of Winter for like 3 years in a row now. 3 years in a row, George Martin has said, oh, I think the Winds of Winter is 3/4 done. I think it's 3/4 done. He's been saying that for years. Whereas he was also saying in recent interviews, oh yeah, I've been writing some Dunk and Egg stories lately. I better write more Dunk and Egg, is what George has been saying in recent interviews. So I think it's possible. I think it genuinely is possible that we might get more Dunk and Egg books before we get the Winds of Winter. And I think some fans might be okay with that. I mean, like, look, I would love to see the full story of Dunk and Egg told on the page. George Martin has talked about writing like 12 Dunk and Egg books to tell the whole life story of Dunk and Egg. And like knowing where it's going, I think it could be incredibly epic, and we'll talk about that more in the spoiler zone shortly. Thank you, Glidus, who donates and says Glidus. I think this means that Glidus is a Pokemon, You know how like Pokemon can only say their own name? I think Glidus is the same. Glidus is also a Pokemon that only says Glidus. Glidus says Glidus. Did you know that you can not only sign up for Nebula at nebula.tv/AltShiftX, you can also sign up to Nebula at nebula.tv/Glidus. That's another thing you can do. The Glidus Nebula also has all of the Dunk times and all of the Dragon times and the fake Jon Snow and a whole lot of other stuff. So go Glidus yourself at nebula.tv/Glidus. Get Glidus. It's Glidus time. Also, just like go watch Glidus's other videos. Glidus made a very lengthy video about whether or not corn exists in Westeros, which, believe you me, is a more complex tale than you might otherwise have presumed. I've been roasted in the comments. I was accused of not having watched Glidus's corn video, or Swift was anyway. I can assure you that both I and AltShiftX have seen Glidus's corn video multiple times, and if I forgot some of the taxonomic details in the heat of a moment, forgive me. But yeah, go watch Glidus. Anyway, thank you, Jess Just Kidding K, who says, I believe we get to see Daemon and Tybalt in the crowd, specifically during the fathers influencing their sons bit of the speech. Speaking of that speech, I really love the way the camera focuses on Maekar and Egg, considering how they influence their sons. Are you for real, Jess? I think you might be right. Let's look. So when Dunk is making his speech, we do get these shots of yeah. So I think Jess is saying that this might be Sir Tybalt Lannister on the left and Daemon Lannister the Grey Lion on the right. I think that's what Jess is saying. I don't know if that's true, but I guess it could be true. I mean, are those lions? Are they lions? There are some pins on the kid's cloak. It's on screen now. So yeah, these two is this Tybalt Lannister and Daemon Lannister? Glidus in the live chat. You need to show the screen. Yeah, I know. Sometimes I forget to press the button. Thank you, Glidus. Oh no. Haymaker in the live chat says Astroglidus. Schubert says, what the hell is a Glidus? Isn't it the sound that a giraffe makes? Anyway, don't derail us. So Tybalt Lannister. Is this Tybalt Lannister and Daemon Lannister? I guess it could be, but I don't know. Because the credits don't say the names of these characters. So I don't know. I think the question is this a lion's mane and a lion's face? Is that what the clasp is? I don't know. Keanu says they kind of look like Thor cosplayers. Yeah, okay. I don't know. But I hope that that's Daemon and Tybalt. That would be cool. And yeah, I agree. The focus on like sons and fathers is really interesting. How, yeah, we get the shots of Maekar and Egg reflecting on their relationship, reflecting on how Egg feels like he doesn't know Maekar, which is really... And obviously Maekar's fraught relationship with Darren and with Aerion. And I think also the implication is that, you know, it then cuts to Dunk. And I think, you know, Dunk looked up at Arlen in his head before. I think that, you know, Arlen is like Dunk's father. And I think that in a way, Dunk is kind of like Egg's father. I think they're more like brothers, but, you know, Egg is Dunk's squire, you know, and so Dunk is the senior in that relationship and the mentor in that relationship. And Dunk is to Egg as Arlen was to Dunk. And Dunk's like passing down that like fatherly protection and love. And so, yeah, I think that's really beautiful. Thank you, Z Jacob, who says Dunk has become my favorite GM character. So good. And thank you, Jack Mac. All right, I think it is time to enter the spoiler zone. Are you all ready for the spoiler zone? Gird your loins. We're about to get spoilery. So in the spoiler zone, we may spoil any and all Game of Thrones shows and books. So let's get into it. So I think that probably the biggest spoilery thing to talk about is Daemon Targaryen's dream. So Daemon says that he has prophetic dreams and the dreams come true, and he says, I have seen you, Dunk, and a fire, and a dead dragon. A great beast with wings so large that they could cover this meadow. It had fallen on top of you, but you were alive, and the dragon was dead. So I'm gonna spoil what that means. Spoiler warning. Spoiler warning. So the main meaning of this dream is that Baelor Targaryen will die in Dunk's trial by combat. Baelor is the dragon. Baelor is the Targaryen dragon. And it's kind of a fun irony because Daeron the Drunken thought that the dead dragon might be himself. Daeron was worried that Dunk might get Daeron killed, and that still might have happened at the trial. But yeah, spoiler, what happens is that Baelor dies. Now, the thing that's surprising and interesting, that's different from the book, is that Daeron also says he sees a fire. That bit is not in the book. And the fire with the dead dragon, I think, evokes Summerhall. Because, spoiler, Egg dies in a fire at Summerhall. Egg becomes king. He tries to rule well. He becomes obsessed with dragons. He wants to hatch dragons from eggs. And there's a mysterious fire. And a lot of people theorize that Egg might have deliberately sacrificed his own family or deliberately sacrificed himself to try and make the dragons hatch. And so I think that the fire could be the fire of Summerhall, and I think the dead dragon could be Egg. I think that's the meaning of the fire and the dead dragon. So there's a double meaning here, which I think is really cool. And you could probably connect it to other dead Targaryens and dead dragons. Like the death of Aerys, the Mad King, when he was trying to burn King's Landing. Like, maybe that's a fire and a dead dragon. I mean, the death of Aerion, like Aerion drinks wildfire and dies. Maybe that's like a fiery death and a dead dragon. Maybe like Daenerys and Khal Drogo's fire, the funeral pyre. Maybe that's a dead dragon in some way. I'm sure you could connect it to other things. Maybe the resurrection of Jon Snow will involve a fire, and Jon Snow is the dead dragon. I think there's lots of different ways that could be interpreted. Egg says this episode that Aerion thinks he's a dragon in human form. And like, that's one of the interesting things. Is Aerion just mean, or is Aerion genuinely insane? Does Aerion actually think he's a dragon? And I think in some sense he does think that. At least certainly later on he believes it, because Aerion drinks wildfire thinking it'll transform him into a dragon, but it just transforms him into a corpse. And I think that we have to speculate that Aerion must have had dreams. Aerion must have had dreams telling him that if you drink wildfire, you'll transform into a dragon. And I really like the theories in the community that maybe all these different Targaryen dreamers, everyone throughout history, they've all been having the same dream. And what the dream really means is it's Daenerys hatching dragons at Khal Drogo's funeral pyre, but it's been misinterpreted by the Mad King Aerys. It's been misinterpreted by all these different Targaryens throughout history. It's been misinterpreted by Aerion, thinking that drinking wildfire will make a dragon. And it's been misinterpreted by Egg. A lot of some people speculate that Egg did Summerhall because he thought that it would give him dragons, but he was really seeing Daenerys and her fire. I think that's a really cool theory. I think Joe Magician is a YouTuber who made a really good video about that theory, so you should check out Joe Magician, because Joe Magician is great. In the books, Aemon Targaryen says, "My brothers dreamed of dragons, and the dreams killed them, everyone." So Aemon is saying that Daeron and Aerion and Egg were killed by their dreams. So I think that Daeron's dreams drove him to depression and alcoholism and self-destruction. Daeron dies of a disease that he got from a sex worker in the books. And Aerion's dreams killed him because his dreams convinced him that he should drink wildfire, and that killed him. And Egg's dreams killed him because he dreamed of hatching dragons, and that led to the fire at Summerhall. So it's really tragic how each of Aemon's brothers are killed by their dreams. I should mention that Aerion has a son named Maegor in the books. Maegor's relevant to the last trial of 7 that happened. And it's funny that Aerion likes the worst king in Targaryen history. One of the worst kings in Targaryen history. He's such a fan that he names his child after it. It's like naming your child Adolf. It's just not something that you should do. In the spoiler zone, I guess I can also mention that this disagreement between Raymond and Stefan leads to 2 rival branches of House Fossaway. This spat with Stefan's betrayal and Raymond's objection to Stefan's betrayal. This leads to 2 separate branches of House Fossaway, Cider Hall and New Barrel. And in the book, Raymond paints his shield green. So Raymond becomes the founder of the green apple Fossaways, while Stefan is the red apple Fossaways. So there is a lasting political legacy of this disagreement that we're seeing here. Even 100 years later, the Fossaways are still divided into these two rival apple branches, which is pretty fun and cute. We will activate the spoiler warning hazard lights. So we had a spoilery question from Kennard, who says, spoiler zone theory, maybe Summerhall was a success. Whatever Egg did caused the rising tide of magic that we witness in A Song of Ice and Fire. Maybe this was necessary for the rebirth of dragons and started a new long night cycle. The timing also fits the Wildling White Walker reports. Yeah, well, that's one of the great mysteries in the books, is why are the White Walkers attacking now? Like, the White Walkers start attacking years before the birth of Daenerys' dragons. So it's not the dragons that cause it. Because, Mance Rayder says, or Tormund says that, like, yeah, the White Walkers have been attacking us for, like, a long time, and this has been a problem. He doesn't say exactly how long, but it certainly sounds like years of White Walker attacks. So it's like, why now? Why now? I blame Bloodraven, but I blame Bloodraven for everything. That's one of the esoteric mysteries, is like what causes the random seasons, what causes magic coming and going, what causes White Walkers and dragons existing or not existing. They say that when the last dragon died, the winters became colder and crueler. Like, where's the cause and where's the effect? Do dragons cause magic, or does magic cause dragons? Does dragons cause White Walkers, or does White Walkers cause dragons? I generally subscribe to the theory that, like, Azor Ahai or some ancient legendary figure did some evil, like tried to steal magic from the children of the forest, or tried to steal fire from the gods, or, some mythic magic crime was committed, and that created dragons and White Walkers. Like some pre-Valyrian dragon people did some messed up magic ritual, and that, like, created the bond between humans and dragons, and it also caused the White Walkers to exist. I think the White Walkers are like the ghosts of angry children of the forests, or like disembodied spirits of the old gods. I don't know the specifics, but like something along those lines I think is what happened, and I think is what caused the White Walkers and the dragons in the ancient past. And I think that the ultimate end of this series will involve the dragons going away forever and the White Walkers going away forever, and the seasons being restored to normal. I think George Martin in an interview did say that in the end the seasons will be restored to regularity, because currently in the world, winters last for an inconsistent amount of time. Summer lasts for an inconsistent number of times. Sometimes it's years, sometimes it's short. And I think that might resolve in the end. And I think it'll be like the end of The Lord of the Rings, where the elves are leaving the world and magic is leaving the world, and we're entering a more mundane, less magical world. Thank you, Kennard. I did scroll down. Thank you for reminding me. Thank you, Jess, who says, unrelated to the events of this season, but if we don't get Maester with a floppy hat in a future season, I will riot. One of the most charming details of the Dunk and Egg books is that the mule Maester wears a floppy hat, and Egg wears a floppy hat, and he rides a mule who also wears a floppy hat. And I think it's one of the cutest things that I've ever seen. And yeah, if they don't put that in the books, in the TV show, then I think we've got some stern words to have with the executives at HBO. If they don't find it in their budget to put a hat on a donkey, what is money for if not putting a hat on a donkey? I'm writing a sternly worded letter to David Zaslav if we don't get Maester in a straw hat. I'm with you. And we should see that in the next season. They are filming season 2, and we should see that. So next year, we should see Maester in a hat. Thank you, Kyle, who says, I think Sir Arlen shrugging suggests that he did knight Duncan, but he's forgotten the words. The scene is shot identically to how Raymond is getting knighted. That's an interesting interpretation. I kind of like it. So yeah, you're saying that in this shot where Lionel is knighting Raymond, yeah, so we see like we see Raymond looking up and we see Lionel looking down. And yeah, those shots do look the same as Dunk looking up and then Arlen looking down. Well, I think that also could be saying that it could be saying that Arlen didn't knight Dunk because we're seeing Raymond being knighted by Lionel and then we're seeing Dunk not being knighted by Arlen. And Arlen saying, "Moo." It's kind of deliberately ambiguous. It's Arlen saying, "Did I knight you? Maybe." Or it's Dunk saying, "Why didn't you knight me?" And it's Arlen saying, "I don't know. I was busy. I died. Sorry. I was gonna knight you, but I died. Oops." Like maybe that's what's going on here. It's very ambiguous. I like it. Because the book leaves it ambiguous forever whether Dunk was knighted by Arlen. The books never absolutely explicitly reveal whether Arlen knighted Dunk. I think it's strongly implied that he didn't, but it's never absolutely shown. Thank you, Jack Mack, who says, wanted to see Egg persuade Lionel to fight. Yeah, it sounds really fun in the book that Egg was all cheeky and ran up to Lionel and poured wine on his head. I guess as part of an argument over Egg trying to persuade Lionel to join Dunk. They've added so many extra scenes with Lionel, it's almost surprising that they didn't add Egg trying to persuade Lionel. I guess it didn't fit into the flow of this episode. But yeah, that could have been cute. Thank you, Jess, who says, I never picked up on the fact that the dragon on top of Dunk in Darren's dream is foreshadowing up from when Baelord dies until now. Maybe Egg also falls on Dunk in Summerhall. Maybe the attempt at resurrecting dragons leads to it falling on top of him. Yeah. So spoiler, but when Baelord dies, Dunk says up. And yeah, it's like the dragon falling down in the dream. And a lot of people theorize about exactly how Dunk and Egg die at Summerhall. So yeah, maybe the dead dragon falling on top of Dunk in Darren's dream corresponds to Egg in some way falling on top of Dunk. I mean, maybe the magic sacrifice, the fire makes the roof of Summerhall fall down on top of Dunk. There's also theories about the pyromancers having sand to put out wildfire, because there are pyromancers at Summerhall according to the World of Ice and Fire book. And book 2 talks about the pyromancers using sand to put out wildfire. And Dunk has a dream in book 2 about sand suffocating him. So some people put all those dots together and they're like, okay, Dunk must get suffocated by sand in Summerhall, and so maybe that connects to the dragon falling on top of him. I don't know. There's a lot of imagery that could be interpreted in different ways. I'm not even sure if George Martin has decided exactly what the circumstances are of Dunk and Egg dying at Summerhall. I think there's a lot of different ideas. Thank you, Watcher, who says, how did Beesbury make his moustache so orange? Yeah, I wonder, if you can even get orange dye in this medieval world. Maybe, Humphrey Beesbury has to, specially import the dye from Tyrosh at enormous cost. But hey, it's worth it. Whatever the price is for that bee yellow moustache, it's a bargain at thrice the price. Thank you, Connor, who says, Aemon, like his brothers, dies of prophetic dreams because he dies of being old. He dies of his dreams because he dies of being old. I mean, look, I think that, Aemon dies when he's on the way south on the ship with Sam, and he dies while talking about prophetic dreams, because he's talking about, oh, shit, it turns out Daenerys is the chosen one, Azor Ahai. And he talks about, believing in the prophecy with Rhaegar in book 4. So he is certainly amidst his dreams when he dies. But I think, he says that I shouldn't have left the wall. He says that if I stayed at the wall, then I would still be alive because the wall preserves me. The wall is the reason why I've lived so long. I don't know if we can say that dreams killed Aemon, but he was certainly amidst his dreams when he died. Thank you, Jess, who says, every time Bloodraven gets blamed for something he probably had no part in, Bittersteel's golden skull's smile grows more. Yeah, because I talked about how, the Blackfire Rebellion is partly, at its heart, a war between Bloodraven and the Blackwoods versus Bittersteel and the Brackens. And even today, Bittersteel's gilded skull, is still being carried by the Golden Company in Essos. And in the books, the Golden Company and Bittersteel's skull are with young Griff, who Varys and Illyrio are supporting and helping take Westeros, while Bloodraven is teaching Bran, and I think Bloodraven has plans for Jon Snow and possibly also Daenerys. And so, kind of in an abstract way, the Blackfire rebellions are kind of still happening, with Jon Snow and Daenerys representing the Targaryens versus young Griff, the Blackfire. And I love that for them. It's like the worst sibling rivalry of all time. That like 120 years later, they're still arguing over who gets to have Shiera Seastar. Thank you, Daniel Miller. And thank you, Daniel Miller, again, who says, my favorite part of the book was the 7 blessing dunk with a knight that remembers his vows on the way to the arena. Yeah, I really like the bit in the book where the common people thank Dunk and praise Dunk for being the one knight who does the right thing. And I'm disappointed that they removed that. I think that Alt Shift X has a list of complaints about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. There's a list of complaints that Swift has. And if you would like to hear them, subscribe to Nebula at the link below and listen to hours upon hours of Dunk talk with Alt Shift X and Glidus. It's a fun show. I really like that clip in A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms when Dunk is about to go drinking with Raymond, and Dunk looks at the puppet show, and the puppet girl is saying, "Come see our show. It's great." It's such a cute line. Go and watch Dunk Time. Okay, all right. We're going to wrap up this live stream shortly. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for participating. We recently hit 2 million subscribers on YouTube. So thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone who watches the videos. We try really hard to make good videos. And so I appreciate the support. And I'm glad that we're having fun watching this new show. I'm glad that this show is so good. And I'm grateful that you all are here. So we'll see you next time. We will return to our usual schedule soon. We'll go back to live streaming every Sunday night at about 10:40 p.m. Eastern Time Sundays. Is that the right time? Yeah, 10:45 p.m. Eastern Time Sundays. Our explained scripted videos are coming out every week, and the live streams are right after the episodes, and we're also doing Dunk Time. So I think that my voice is dying, so we're going to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and see y'all next time. Cheers.